The Best Damn League show returns for episode 2 of 2026. Obviously, we've actually seen some LEC games now. It's not all just speculation, hypothesis. I will say, but one of those weird things. Maybe it's something about Rich just brings this out to me. I'm going to do my thing where I actually educate pedagogically people how English works. If you don't know, by the way, guys, one thing that even, yes, sadly, British and English people constantly get wrong colloquially is, when you have an idea about how something might work, but it's just an idea, that's not actually a theory. A theory is actually when that's a hypothesis. A theory is when you've taken that idea and done some sort of experiment with it that suggests it might work, but even then hasn't proven it. So I will just say, we haven't hypothesized. That's all we did in the past episode. We didn't actually have theories about how things work. We didn't see any games yet, had we? So obviously, we had initialized on the last episode. This episode, we've got Rich'sWrath, who is the director of the Black Lodge, which is like his agency thing that he does. Obviously, yes, he used to work with the H2K, which isn't in LEC, and then one time he offered 5.5 fucking K. Yeah, we all know all that. We all know. The worst thing about that, by the way, guys, is you're all the fans who kept telling me stuff like, shut the fuck up going on about frogging. That was years ago. You're now going on about stuff from 11 years ago. That's how ruined you are. I was doing that in 2015, talking about Froggen being the best player in the world 3 years earlier, and you were like, shut the fuck up. Also, by the way, spoiler, might be relevant to this episode. Nemesis hadn't played in LEC since 2020, and by the way, Reckless last title was in fucking 2018, so just fix up. Again, all you Froggen haters. Really, you just hate Froggen. It wasn't even about it being old, was it? You all still talk about Faker. You didn't even watch him play. Anyway, this isn't even a show about Faker. He'll never be on any E1. Or at least I certainly hope he won't. If he actually came to LCS or LEC at the end of his career, that would be the one that would make me sad, mate. Normally, I don't give a fuck, if you switch teams, you go where... listen, I could handle when, George Weah played for, Man City or when I was like, whatever, it's whatever, innit? But I genuinely hope if Faker just please retire at T1. Don't ever go to the West and play for,
You don't want to see Carmine call Faker?
I know.
What's going on?
It'd be the worst shit of all time, wouldn't it? And then, mate, you've actually even nailed my nightmare fuel. Because then I'd have to see Carmine Cop fans actually flame Faker when he loses mid. I can't take this, mate. Come on, please. I don't mind if they do it jokingly in a stadium when it's that bullshit off-season tournament where they're like, oh, pretend to boo everyone. But whatever. It is what it is. So, okay, if Pete, obviously, Rich also does EuroLeague, so he has his own show. By the way, is that actually on every week of splits when it's doing LEC? Do you just do it? Is it infrequent? How do you logically set that up?
No, it is every week. I mean, people will say that can't be trusted because obviously I did create a Korean league show which just randomly comes and goes with the wind. Okay. So, don't have too many legs to stand on. But no, EuroLeague's pretty consistent. So yeah, every week, immediately after LEC. So yeah.
Okay. Right. Obviously, we always have the guest start first. So what is your good point?
So my good point is... I have to check. I can't even remember. NAVI. So obviously, like most content creators in the League of Legends space, I had to do a power rankings, didn't I? And I put NAVI very low down. Now, what I will say, similar to sort of your differentiation between hypotheses and concepts, etc., this isn't me now saying, oh, Na'Vi are good. I assume Na'Vi probably won't do too well overall this year. But the good things that I liked from this start, at least, and again, week one to me, as we'll probably talk about later when it comes to other teams, I think it means more for some teams than it does for other teams. So for me, it is actually more meaningful for Na'Vi than it would be for a G2, for example. I'm probably going to learn more. The good news is twofold. One, hopefully we're seeing a true move on from the Rogue era, which at this point, yes, I know they won a title, etc., but that is a truly sort of tainted era of European League of Legends. Not for the whole league, but, they did feel like a bit of a stain on the league, I think it's fair to say. So I think, we're hopefully going to see a true moving on from that. Because if people remember as well, by the way, Rogue didn't just come and go. They came, they went because they got rebranded. Then they bloody rebranded back to Rogue again, didn't they? So a nice double jeopardy of PTSD for us all who had to live through that. Hopefully that's now well and truly moved on from. But also the rookies. We talked actually a bit on EuroLeague about how this wasn't necessarily the best week in terms of showcasing all the new talent in the LEC, but Na'Vi in particular did do a good job of that. Really impressed with their rookies in week one. Mainta, who I think a lot of people who watched the ERLs were fairly high on and have been for a little while. So he's maybe less of a surprise. And if you watched EU Masters, then maybe you'd have been, or have had positive thoughts about the jungler. But I actually thought that all of them played relatively well. And Han Sam D, I know. Oh, sorry, what's he called now? Sam D. Is that his?
Yeah.
Sam D. I know he's not technically a rookie because he played a little bit but it really is a rookie, right? Like he is a rookie. So yeah, I also thought that he put in relatively decent week's performance. So yeah, I just think overall, Na'Vi do not look like a team like, an LR, perhaps, you might just roll over and have their belly tickled. They actually look like they're going to compete. They look like you can't just show up and beat them for free. So that's good. As I said, week 1. So we'll see what happens. Maybe in week 2, they're complete trash. I don't know. But I am pleased so far they could have been 3-0, by the way. Let's also mention that. I mean, no team went 3-0, but they were probably the closest to going 3-0. So yeah, positive start for them.
Fully agree. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Rilek?
I've been saying Relic, but I think that's definitely wrong. So I don't steal my pronunciation. I think that's definitely wrong.
Sure. I mean, I would say that he was a guy that when he was in ERLs, he showed like a really, really like high potential ceiling, which, I didn't hear that they'd actually signed this guy until Tiger was signed. And then the Spanish guy who used to play for Barcelona Esports. And then it was announced that he was only going to stay for one split. And really, they'd signed this like a 19-year-old jungler. And if you're going to build around a franchise rookie, this guy is probably one of the best rookies that you could have gone for in ERLs, given how he's able to take control of the game. So I thought that was. I wasn't too concerned about him. Obviously, I'm not that high on Mainter, not because I don't think he's good. It's just that I think that he's probably only the 3rd best top laner from his class. In that, I think Knack I think Knack and sorry, I just completely forgot his name. Trayson, that's his name. Trayson and Knack, I think, are better in his class, so I think he's good. But I think it's one of these situations where you have like a lot of really good top lane rookies coming up at the same time in basically a role in Europe that's historically been pretty bad, honestly. Like if you talk about strong side top laners, I don't think we've really had that many over the year. But now we have like 4 or 5 coming up in like kind of the same class who have this potential to really change everything about top lane in Europe, which is really promising. And I had Mainter kind of a little bit down on that list. I still think he's really good, but yeah, I think for sure on my power rankings, where did I have it, man? The 9th on my power rankings. So they've overperformed my expectations. I will say 2 things though. So I will just add one more thing, which is I think that their coaching staff is really, really, really good. Like if you look at The Rock's history, he's their head coach. He's been on a lot of teams in ERLs and basically massively overperformed with very reasonably lower budget rosters. Before KC. That's why he ended up getting picked up by KC. I think Lopon, who's their assistant coach, number 2 coach, I'm not too sure what his exact role is, but I saw him do spot coaching on Heretics, and he was really, really very strong spot coach, very good analyst. And obviously they've got Go2One, who did a lot of good things on BDS over the years. So I think their coaching staff is excellent as well. So it's a surprise, but it's not out of the realms of possibility, is what I would say.
Yeah, what I would say is if I'd have done a power ranking, just mainly because I don't know that much about the RL players, I would have ranked them fairly low and I would have waited to see what would happen, especially because they're like known quantities, are Poby and Paris and then a little bit of Sam D, like you say. So that's not really enough to get super hyped about. But I have to say, one thing I'll actually throw out there, if someone's listening, in theory, content creators, is that you should be the people watching these shows. One thing that is sorely missing in League of Legends in Europe is in Counter-Strike, I can tell you, people have figured out that you can't all be the content creator that just only talks about the top teams, because spoiler, one, like people are going to watch my video about that if the player move happens or something happens, or they're going to watch Maui Snakes or something, or some top person basically. So what are the areas that is available that you can carve out? There's actually a guy who I sometimes go on his shows in Counter-Strike called King T who did this. His whole thing was about getting to know everyone who's good in tier 2 and all the people who might one day be in tier 1, and he made a series called Prospects where where what he would do was, as soon as he identified someone like that, he would make a video on them where they do a little bit of like show some of their gameplay, analyze some of their strengths, kind of, you know, make like a projection on what their trajectory could be. And then the reason it was actually excellent is because early on, yeah, everyone ignored it because like, who's the fuck's this guy? But the reason it's a banger now is he nailed so many of them that almost every time a known player goes, like a nobody, goes to tier 1 and gets like a chance in a top team. If you ever go, I just go to YouTube and put in King T and then put in that person's name. And the amount of times there is a video from 2 years ago was mega. So what I will say is that is so badly needed in European League of Legends, because right now it's only people watching the ERL broadcasts who know who these good players are. Or in my case, I have to have a player or a coach who just tells me like, yeah, this guy's going to actually be good, or that's actually not, like, you know, maybe I make a tweet like, who the fuck's this guy? And then they're like, actually, it'll be pretty decent jungle pickup, you know, and you do well in LVP or whatever. The problem is there isn't that in League of Legends. So I feel like the worst thing as well is you get all the new announcement of who the LEC people are, and you never fully know, unless you've actually followed the results of the RLs, who is actually the person who is. Like for example, that's why so many people had to be told a million times that, you know, Camilo, it wasn't even a top prospect, mate. He's just some fucking random, like, the reach into the depths and just pull a guy out. Like, that's not like the same as like the SK people who've come up. Like, those are people who were going to get back in. Like, you look, the Jopper guy was probably going to be on a team no matter what. Like, these are the people who like had some hype around them, or people thought they were legit. So I do think, one, that would actually be pretty good content. I think someone should consider doing that in English for the major ones, etc. And then also, because like, for example, later when we get to the Los Ratones things, it's hard to know, like, is Veli even in that group? Because every fan just repeated it. But I know those fans never saw this guy play 1 second of League of Legends before he was on Los Ratones. So I need to know, is that Los Ratones fan telling me that, or someone who actually watched the NLC, you know? So the main thing that was a surprise about this team, as you can sort of tell by how we've all talked about it, is actually been the GMing. Actually looks fairly solid. Yeah, the squad they made for that last split of last year did look quite cynical. I mean, sorry, now it clearly was just a placeholder team, wasn't it? Like, they, and look, fair play, it seems like they did actually tell people before the end of the split, like, yeah, look, you aren't going to be here next year. Like, this is just sort of like, we have to put essentially 5 warm bodies out there just to meet our contractual obligations. And then, yeah, next year we'll start with our real team, with who the fuck we want to play in the league. I will just throw this out there as a humorous aside, since I don't have too much on Navi overall, which is, it has aged poorly, that whole Nemesis thing of like, well, that's why we didn't let someone like Velia go to a team like a Navi. Because imagine if you went to the LEC and had one bad split on a team that was really bad, that could ruin your prospects forever. Nemesis, my old friend, you always do entertain me. You know what? You always deliver, son. Not intentionally, but I don't know. If you know the term, a lol cow. He is a lol cow, mate. He just produces lols infinitely for me. Like, I don't want him to leave the farm. Please keep him there. He's producing pure cream and it's fabulous. The flavour, excellent. I used to be annoyed by him. I've learned to sort of reset the filters. It's comedy now. I'm loving it all. So, okay, I will say the obvious main thing about this team after 3 BO1s is, also, mate, if I was going to have a new set of players without like a backbone of experience, in theory, the best meta strategy you could have, LR could maybe learn something from this. Just be really fucking aggressive in the early game. This team actually like did work, mate. Like, how many of these games did they leap out and get a lead and get advantages and get in this position where, as MKOI showed you last year, that makes it easier later in the game. Like, that even worked. I don't know how much it could work. Like, look, even though you guys are going, well, I didn't roll that, I still think they'll be like 7th or 8th or something, mate. Even if we're being kind, like, they're probably not going to be a top team. But for your first ever split and without big names, I think they've done a pretty decent job. Like, the actual aggregate level of the team looks solid. Also, it is BO1, so this is when you would expect them to thrive. And I agree, actually, of the team, like, I already knew who Porby is, and I know who Paris is. I actually thought Mainter, yeah, I can see why he had some hype around him now. In fact, the most obvious thing I thought when I saw these Navi games was, this is forget the idea you don't in Fnatic get big names. No, your failures is you let people bring along their mate to play top lane. Like, why aren't you getting the Mainters and the Tracers of the world? You're fucking Fnatic, you lunatics. Like, that's the failure of the other teams, mate. So no, the Mainter guy looks like a pretty solid pickup, if anything. Maybe slightly overqualified to be on Navi.
By the way, fun little tidbit as well that people are forgetting about Navi is that Larson, obviously, who speaking
probably still being paid by contract, I'm sure at this point.
no, but what's ridiculous is that this guy who's just managed his career horribly, he took a pay cut to play again in mid lane, but he was on this massive bumper contract, and he was obviously going to get kicked anyway, unless he just puts in some S tier back-to-back performances at the end of last year. In which case, if that did happen, then presumably you're representing yourself as the old Larson, and now you're getting underpaid anyway. So this guy literally just signed like the worst Catch-22 contract amendment of all time, and now he's just stuck on Navi, like not making very much at all.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe they've even released him. Maybe the amendment was also he just gets released at the end of the year. I don't know. Obviously, respect for wanting to play, but whoopsie. Number 17 or whatever it is. And another side note, because like the point you made on content creation, which I agree, like if something like that existed, it would be really cool. But unfortunately, and this is a bit of a doomer take, the ERLs are now just so unbelievably cooked that I'm not even sure like what the process going forward for like player recruitment is going to be. Now, I'm not saying in the very short term,
in what sense are they
something similar where, you know, LFL teams do well, then an EU Master team does well, and best players sort of get picked from that. But the incentive to play ERLs is so low now, it's unbelievable. The payment that you get for playing on an ERL
the salary
team
just went way down.
Is horrendous. Like, in fact, to the point where, I mean, I still work with like a bunch of players who are sort of, let's just call it like the top echelon of ERLs or whatever. Every single one of them, I think, bar one, asked me if they should just quit league.
Fucking hell. Okay.
These were people who had like very good. In fact, I can talk to one because he's now currently not playing league. Xerxes, who had a very good year last year, is just not playing league right now. Right. Because it's just not worth it. Because for someone who's playing at the level that he's playing at, to get paid like 1,800 euros a month or whatever to play like 16 hours of league a day, he's just not going to do it. Like, he's just not going to do it. So yeah, the unfortunately, and there obviously was a time where there was a massive bubble, like people like Zico who were playing in LVP for like 11k a month or something absolutely bonkers. But we've gone so far the other way now that I don't know if the pipeline to pro is even there anymore. Like it's just the incentive to play is just so low. So unfortunately, Europe's been a pretty good talent producer. I think we failed in other aspects to reach, you know, the top internationally recently, but I don't know what's going to happen to that.
I'll tell you the part that's a bummer about that as well is we were also literally on the cusp of completely cocking NA. We were going to get all their talents coming to the ERLs. It was going to be hilarious. They would never have been in the Team Liquids of the world. They'd have all just come to an ERL team. But sadly, that won't happen if you get fuck all money, mate. Like, and no one will pay for the visas at that point. So who knows at that point? That's a bummer. Okay.
I mean, I'll say that obviously the ERLs are pretty cooked. I agree, but we're not going to feel the negative effects of that for a couple of years, right? Because, you know, the current crop that come in now will just be there and then they won't be replaced, right? And then EU is really, really fucked in a couple of years. But I will say that right now, we're in a situation where we have all of these rookies. You know, we talk about the Tracers and the Mainters and the Relics of the world, Empirosas, you know. Then we have all these coaches who have like battle tested, right? So one of the things that people complained about in Europe was the quality of coaching. But a lot of the coaches who are now getting promoted to LEC, as head coaches or as assistant coaches, strategic coaches, you had to prove yourself at ERLs. Like you had to prove yourself and you had to find success at ERLs, right? And this is why you have people like The Rock. This is why you have people like Melzet. This is why you have people like Lopon, right? These guys are people that had to prove themselves. And this is the thing that is really, really going to... this is the big... So I think the ERL system has been really competitive for many, many years, and this is the big bumper harvest that Europe is getting right now. But yeah, it's not going to. If what's going on in ERLs, especially Spain was the main ERL for many, many years and was top two, and they're in a worse situation than almost anybody.
Yes.
As far as
it's not like a third party tournament or something, isn't it? Yeah. Which is even like invitational or some shit.
I'm not exactly sure, but I know that the salaries for sure are like nothing now. Like, and that is where things are going to be at their worst, right?
By the way, it's The Rock, not just the most ludicrous name to have like in the game. You're not even a player, bro, and you've called yourself The Rock. Are you a WWE superstar, or are you like a fucking named after a 1990s Michael Bay movie? Like, what are we doing? The Rock, all right?
Also, I'll never understand. One thing I've never understood is one thing this is what agents could level up on too. When they're really young and they haven't made it to the top here, get them to change their fucking name, mate. Like, get them to pick an actual name that's good. Like, one thing that's mad is, one of the reasons my shows all work is I do all these rules. Like, you have to be able to say it out loud and then spell it based on hearing it. You have to be able to Google it. It doesn't just come up with a bit. By the way, The Rock, you're done already. Like, you're absolutely cooked. Like, I'll give you an example. There's a person in drum and bass. He had exactly this problem. He became quite famous as a drum and bass producer. His alias, Audio. The word audio. Now he later changed to like audio snake picks. He realised, yeah, wait a minute, I've just fucked myself on every, like, if I put that in Spotify, it's going to just find audio, is it? You mad fucking, like, what do you do? So anyway, I agree, The Rock is just a shit name, innit? What are you doing, mate? Come on. It's also the name of a mega movie. It's not just the rest. It's a wrestler. It's a movie. The last thing we're thinking of is a Greek coach, mate. In LEC.
It honestly broke me as well when Patrick changed his name from Sheriff to Patrick.
I know. By the way, Sheriff. By the way, here's also why that one is criminal. Because, bro, when you have a name like Sheriff, I can guarantee you those horny fucking LEC casters are going to crowbar as many like fucking double meaning entendres in as possible, and you will get an iconic play out of that. But the Sheriff, I guess, is a new sheriff in town. They can't do anything with Patrick, mate. You know what I mean? Like SpongeBob joke. That's about it. That's about it, mate.
And it was Sheriff spelt wrong, so it was good for the algo. Like, you know, it wasn't going to mix anything. So
yes,
sad days.
Indeed. Okay, Peter, what do you actually like? What's good?
So I'm going to feed onto Richard's point, which is that, you know, we've only seen 1 week of LEC so far, so it's hard to draw massive conclusions. But what I would say is that it looks the state of the league right now looks like the floor is much, much higher than almost any season I can remember, right?
Okay.
And, you know, you look at the Rogues in the past, you look at the SKs, the XLs and things like this, they always had rosters which you thought there was just no hope, right? There was no hope for these rosters. But if you look at the 2 teams that were closest to going 3-0 this week, it was NAVI and Shifters, I would argue as well, right? And I think, you know, we spent a lot of time last year shitting on EU GMing, which was kind of pretty garbage, right? Like, let's be clear, right? But this year, I think that a lot of teams have identified really big issues that they've had in their team and just worked and found smart ways to fix them, right? And I would say the 2 big teams I would use for this are Vitality and Shifters. I was Navi as well, but we spoke about Navi a bit in depth, right? Which is Shifters and Vitality. What were the 2 worst things about these teams last year, right? It's that in mid-game, they were completely fucking clueless and had no idea what they were supposed to be doing on the map. That caused their games to like extend for forever, right? And often into losses, right? So what did they do? Vitality brought in Humanoid. Humanoid had a bit of a rough week, especially his Talia game was pretty rough. But I would say that it was clear that at least they were forcing things with purpose on the map. You know, I could see what they were trying to do. But the big thing I would say is Shifters going from Paris to Trimby made a massive difference. And I give one example of this, which is, I think, in the game against GX, which they should have won, right? That was the game where there was a base race at the end, and they kind of like threw the entire game. You know, that would have been their 3-0 game. They snuck a Baron in exchange for a Dragon, right? And that is, you look at the comms, and Trimby is just there, like, yelling. I'm not entirely sure what he's yelling, right? But if you've ever heard Trimby on comms, on Fnatic, I don't know how much of this on Heretics was talked, so I shouldn't talk about Heretics, but the public voice comms that Fnatic released and that Keed released, he's always like shouting, you know, do this, right? And it leads to your team being very, very decisive, even if it's not always the right play. And I think that's a big thing that this team was missing, right? Last year at BDS. And on the Vitality side, I think a lot of their issues last year were lack of planning around mid in the early game, which was a little bit here this week, but also like support and jungle having a plan around which lanes they want to play into in mid game, and they're never going to have that issue with Humanoid team, right? Whether or not Humanoid is making the right call, he's going to be making a call, right? And I think as a result, the floor of the league is a lot higher, which means there's no free wins, which means especially
Go on, keep going.
What? Okay.
Listen, you be you, Peter. Never let any of us bring you down. You just be you, mate.
I mean, it's a semantic point, but isn't technically the floor Los Ratones, and therefore it's in the gutter?
Listen.
Fair. But of the LEC teams, I would say. So I would say good.
Oh, there you go. Okay, that's fair. Oh, no, that's actually fair. Yeah, true. They're the guest teams. Yeah. True. Of the 10 teams that are in the LEC, yeah, okay.
I mean, as Gil Hotto, I think it was, said on PGL, you know, this isn't LEC. This is LEC versus.
True.
So
It's true.
there you go.
Yeah.
So Peter is actually correct. I stand corrected.
Yeah, no,
you
he's
are
right. He's nailed it.
correct and semantically correct. So yeah, keep going, keep going.
Yeah, I mean that's my thought, right? Like, so I don't think that. So I didn't learn much about G2 this week. I learned a bit about Koi, right? But like the big things that I learned this week was that Navi shifters, Vitality, SK, and Heretics, who were like probably the worst team, they're expected to be towards the bottom this year. I would say that of those teams, 4 of them showed me something that leads me to have some kind of optimism after 3 games, right? And I think that is a good sign for the league, because, you know, if you have a league that only has 4 teams like last year where nobody else really matters, that's kind of depressing for viewers. It's kind of boring. It kind of means that scrims, you know, you get split into different scrim groups. And I think hopefully if Navi, Shifters, Vitality, SK can be really, really good this split, then I think it can make the entire region as a whole will benefit, including the.
I even think the way Heretics was built was like very logical and well. I know they didn't have the best week 1 or whatever,
Sure.
but I think what they did was completely logical. They, you know, kept the good and flipped the bad, but logically flipped the bad. Like Seren is a player that I'm quite excited to see. I think both solo laners have a lot of potential upside, and even the coaching staff they brought in. Now, the one thing that I do question on the coaching staff is I think Hidden was a good addition, and I think this guy does decent off seasons, let's say. But I do find the Mithy addition a bit weird, not because I don't think Mithy's good, but actually because I think Mithy's really good. Like, how is the dynamic now? Because you bring in someone as talented and as respected as Mithy, and by the way, the perception that fans or the community at large have about different coaches versus the reality behind the scenes is often very skewed, right? Like some people might say, like, I don't know, Coach X is brilliant, everyone loves him, he has a bunch of LEC titles, but if you go and talk to the players who've been coached by him, they're like, fuck this guy, he's a fraud, he didn't do anything on our team, it was a player-run team, blah, blah, blah. And the inverse can be true as well, right? Someone who doesn't have much of a reputation with the community is actually adored by the players or whatever. But I think with Mithy, it's the case that he has a good reputation. And when you talk to most people who've worked with him, they have plenty of good things to say about him, even
almost
if
universally,
some may not. So I think having Mithy as an assistant coach, someone who's done so much as a player and won so much as a player, someone who's done so much and won so much as a coach, to have this guy sat behind Hidden, who you'd have to say, not that he's a rookie coach or something, but obviously a much less experienced, much less successful coach at the top end, is a bit of a recipe for tension, let's say, to put it mildly. Like, I just feel that can be kind of a ticking time bomb when it's like, how many results are there going to be when bad results are there going to be before someone thinks about, well, we've got this Mithy guy sat here, like, why don't we just put him in? And it might be something that they're pushed into because of community pressure or whatever, not based on anything that's actually happened, what their actual day jobs are. But I just think it's weird to basically, obviously it's a bit of a silly example, but to have like Ancelotti sat behind Sean Dyche or something, you know, like it's just a bit like, come on. It's just a difficult situation for everyone. And by the way, I'm sure Hidden was probably involved in the process that in picking Mithy to be there, because he probably thought, hey, there's loads of value I can extract from this guy. But to me, that is the one awkward thing I have to say about that roster in what I think is an otherwise logically built team. And I think what Peter said is absolutely correct as well. I don't know how good ultimately some of these teams will be. Obviously, it's always going to be a relative proposition, but I do think there's been a lot more logic and sound thinking and reasoning behind a lot of these roster constructions, and I think that is definitely a good thing to see. And I think it might be like, you know, the Premier League this season, for example, where people are like critical of like, Man City aren't that good anymore, Liverpool have dropped off. It's like, but under those teams, the league is so deep and strong, it's crazy.
Mate, you can lose to like Brentford now or something. It's absurd, isn't it?
Mate, Brentford or Bournemouth, I don't care what anyone says. They'd be top 5 in La Liga.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
They just would. They'd be top 5 in La Liga. They would. Like, it's so deep. So that's what I'm hoping what will happen with the LEC, is that all these teams give enough of a push to the teams that we do probably think will ultimately be the top teams, that they actually get more good practice and stage experience this year than they had in previous years.
Sure. By the way, I like the analogy even because I have to say it as someone who does betting, for the sake of, if people don't know how I do it, I don't pretend I'm trying to like maximize my like mucking margins crazy. What I try to do is I try to show you what would I bet on and what is available to bet on. It's like a mixture of exposure and then a little bit of insight. And I do sports, which obviously I'm not an expert in, so I do tiny baby bets on those. But yes, as someone this season who a bunch of times has seen matches like, wait a minute, I could get bloody good odds for like Chelsea against Bournemouth and fucking, you know, like some of these games, like I've got my ass handed to me on fucking Spurs and Chelsea bets on this season because, like the whole thing is there's names that shouldn't on paper. In Football Manager, these teams that do nothing. In real life, somehow, they're all actually pretty good. In fact, there's even teams like the maddest ones are the ones where, in fact, Bournemouth is it, they score 1 million fucking goals. I know they're not a good team in the league, but they literally have a chance to like just randomly beat people. It doesn't even make sense. So no, it's a bit like that in LEC. I'll even go one further. I think not only is the floor raised, because I agree, as long as we do the thing of like the other two of the guest teams and the LEC's the 10 teams. For the 10 teams, you are right. I actually was worried there because I really thought, because the KC fans, here's the thing, this is how you know they're all scumbags, Rich, because they don't come at Peter the same way when they come at us. They come at Peter like, but Peter, isn't there surely somewhere we could be good though? And then he'll be like, well, I guess if you did these, and then like, yeah, see, he says we are good. Like they do that, right? Where they bring out his fucking eternal optimist side, and then he tries to figure out some way, like if he was a coach, that he would believe in them, and that it would be possible to play this way.
Well, I mean, I say KC fans don't really like me very much because I said KCB wouldn't win a game this split. And they've already won.
Where was the lie? So, the joke with that one is, I even said this on some of the insight, the joke with that one is, listen, they probably won't win any more games, but even I bet on Los Ratones in that game, for fuck's sake. And I'm supposed to be an LR here. Even I was like, bloody hell, surely you do just win a game against this team, which hasn't got the real squad.
KCB have unironically been an awesome addition because they've done the two things that they had to do to make it interesting. One, they beat LR, so good job. But two, also, they lost to obviously their sister team because if they didn't, by the way, holy fuck. Because we were talking about this before and we were like, but you know, of the obvious conflict of interest and they're probably just going to roll over. And they were like, actually, no, the real scandal is if they beat the main team and then both teams make playoffs and you're like, But they did their job. They got that loss out the way. So I guess, you know, for the most part, that storyline's a little bit dead in the water. And I doubt they're going to be in contention for playoffs. So, yeah, we'll see.
So first of all...
They also did the other job, which is they made Yukino look really, really good, which is really good for his prospects, you know, getting into LEC in the future. So
in theory, obviously, the most competitive split ever was the famous fucking... SK Miracle Run one, wasn't it, in 2020 summer, but one that was like COVID period anyway. Because if everyone forgets, that's one of the ones where when they all dunk on the Origin players, like, he came 10th, right? They came 10th, and unironically, the top and ADC were considered potentially the best in the league. That's how competitive that split was. That was the one where G2 and Fnatic going into the last week could have not made playoffs. Like that was actually one of the most nut splits ever, but some of that was happenstance, you know, and it was like the last split of the year where you brought people in, etc. So true, that's not the same as GMing, because I do think a lot of this can be attributed to way better GMing. For all the we've all wrecked the LEC for the last like 3 years, basically, for having bad GMing or people missing obvious players, or like I say, like a rare example, like I say, is that Mentor one where they go to like a lesser team, you're like, why you win a top team? Actually, in general, they've all done a pretty good job, with the exception of people where I imagine they're like financially handicapped, like the Fanatics of the world who probably don't actually have the money people imagine they do. Also, so to me, I don't think just the floor's raised. I also think this could be good or bad because this is like the Premier League. I think what you will actually have once we get like 6 more games in is you will have like 3, maybe 4 really good teams, and then everyone else will just be a similar sort of a level. It'll actually be one giant group after that, which is quite similar to what the Premier League is. Once you get outside the elite teams, it's just like in 9 teams that can all beat each other and, depending on matchup, beat the top team. What are you going to say, Richard? Looks like you're going to jump in here. No?
No, I agree.
Looked like you were trying to anticipate saying something. Oh yeah, lastly, I'll just say this as well. On the Heretics point, here's where I can add a little bit of behind-the-scenes info. I actually think I know why Mithy is, though, the assistant coach. I don't think he will ever be a head coach again out of choice, mate, because unfortunately the few times he's tried it, I can just tell you from talking to players, bro, if someone was only a player for Mithy as a coach, not a player when Mithy was the support player in their teams, it's a different story. Like the ones that had him as a coach, all say his insights are great, all this. The problem is, though, I can tell you one of the weirdest things about Mithy, if you can understand this concept, you'll get it, which is a lot of people have made the mistake of thinking he was toxic, right? Because because famously, like 11 years ago or whatever, he got banned with Nuke Duck for saying naughty things on fucking games in solo queue, etc., and said a lot of harsh things. And people know he was quite a aggressive teammate who would like hold people accountable. But what people never understood was, if you ever heard the way Mithy would criticise things, it was very telling. He would always say, like, not like, I'm good, do this and listen to me. He would be like, you're bad and we're all bad. That's like what his mentality was. So he knew like how far he was from Koreans, for example. And his whole shit would be, that's why he's holding you accountable, because like, if we play this badly, we're never going to beat those guys. But it was more like, fix your shit. The problem is, I've noticed as a coach, because I think his identity as a player was the idea of like, he was always better than the others. That actually was where like that confidence came from, with that personality. As a coach, he seemed way softer, mate, and way more sort of kid gloves. And I can even tell you, he absolutely does regret that whole Fnatic period and thinks he sort of like didn't even really coach him, you know, because he had such giant personalities. Some of them would even done more than him in the game. It was hard to actually be that guy who was like holding supermassive players accountable or telling people that you fucked up. He was more sort of trying to like ease his way into it and, you know, make players happy and doing that players coach type thing, which I actually think is not very good in esports games. So I'm not surprised actually in this sense that eventually when he could just get behind someone like a Nuke Duck who's more suited to that kind of personality, he just did it. So I imagine he'll just be like the fucking top assistant coach prospect for the next few years, and he'll probably never go back into being a main head coach again. I also feel like he's a weird guy, because he is someone you can talk to, but he's not an uber social person. So I also feel like he didn't like the whole like media aspect you have to have as a head coach too, where you're held responsible and you have to sort of like sell the team to other people and shit like that. You know, I think he just wants to be the nerd who studies the VOD and tells you what to do in the VOD session, and a little bit of practice. And obviously in this case, another thing that's kind of like an extra feather in his whatever hat is that thing of like, he's now the support whisperer, and that's his thing as well, which by the way, I find that quite exciting that he's with Sten, so I even think that's not a bad pickup. I agree though, what are people doing in these other top teams? Like, so many squads I would have immediately, if I heard this guy's available, just sign tomorrow. Like, it's just had a proven track record of success.
Yeah, but I mean, I think also with head coaches and assistant coaches, strategic coaches, whatever you want to call them, I think you need to have like some amount of game coaching skills and some amount of personal interactions, right? And some amount of disciplinary skills, right? So you know, you can have a disciplinarian coach like, say, a Melzet, right? But then if you're going to have that as your head coach, generally an assistant coach who's a bit more friendly with the players, you know, who can pick up people if they've been yelled down, yes. You know, it can help. And you know, if you have a very personable, you have a very players coach type head coach, sometimes having that little bit of bite behind can also be really, really useful. So I would say different structures for different.
But for the, I mean, maybe this is, you know, ultimately what was the downfall of FlyQuest, because I'm pretty sure, I know it's only based on a bits of video here and there, that Inspired was just chewing out both Mithy and Nuke Duck, and there was like zero pushback at all, by the way. They basically just sat there and took it, as far as I could see. So I'm not sure where the good cop, bad cop dynamic was meant to start and end with that one, I'll put it that way. So I don't
That's
know.
also why I say, though, I am worried when people want the sort of like player coach approach, because even though, yes, it can be very good, I think sadly, I've seen this in sports, people who used to be players do often let the star player just do what they want, mate, because their logic is, have I got to keep him on side or my job's over? Actually, it's the people who tend to be like, they never were a player, they're just a fucking top professional coach who'll be like, I'm going to sort this guy out. I'm going to bring this guy to heel, you know.
The thing is, you might just lose your job anyway.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
You know, I mean, like Alonso just got booted out of Real Madrid basically because Vinny Jr. and Mbappe had two little man children. Like, what can you do? So
with the highest win rate of any coach on Real Madrid, he has the most points per game of any coach and got fired after 7 months. Like, holy shit.
but my star striker's unhappy, so see you later. I don't know. I think it's not like I kind of, even when you hear particularly in the NBA, you'll hear stories about like coaches who had like multiple star players or whatever, and it's like, well, you have to just let them do it. I'm always just sat there thinking, why do you just have to let them do anything? Like, why don't you just fucking man up and just take control of your own team that you've been put in charge of? I don't get it at all. To me, it's the same as if you see a parent in public who is just completely doting and bending the knee to their child who's screaming in the pram. It's like, that's just bad parenting. Surely it's just bad coaching. Like,
well, let me put it like this, Rich. Like, let's say you have a star player on your team, and that player goes and gives a public interview saying that they think you're shit. You're never going to work again in esports if that happens, right? And
I don't know. I obviously I don't know. I'm not a clairvoyant, but I would say no, not necessarily. I think the kind of I would just put it like this: you can say it's a bit of a cop out answer, but I stand on it at least. I think the kind of player or person who would actually do that, I would have so much material on this person in general, or they would have material on themselves publicly to discredit something like that if it wasn't true, that it wouldn't really be relevant anyway. For example, not to, pick on him too much, whatever, but if Nemesis said something like this, like, no fucking skin off my back, like, who gives a fuck? Like, this guy has zero credibility with making grandiose statements that it wouldn't really mean anything. If he was a better player and made the same statements, I don't think that would change anything based on his whole history of chatting nonsense on the internet. So
it only matters if your org backs you, though, because the problem is that a lot of org owners who are knowledgeable, right, will make these kind of decisions, right? And I found that generally the coaches who are most willing to stand up to players who are basically shits like this are either people who've had that playing experience themselves, right, so they can just back it up, or people who literally just don't give a shit about staying in esports and just want to coach for the sake of coaching, right? Like one of the reasons,
Peter, like you can always just get fucked in esports, like completely unfairly and unreasonably, because there's an idiot who's above you in the pecking order. Like that can always happen. Obviously, all bets are off in esports regardless. But I'm just talking about, if logically things were working as they should, then some idiot man-child, no matter what the sport or whatever, if they make some stupid public statement, in reality, it shouldn't really mean anything. But yeah, if you've got fucking Ineos or someone in charge, maybe you're just screwed either way. Like, who knows?
I mean, all I say is I've had the perfect experience of this in another region, which won't be mentioned because of NDAs. But sometimes these things can happen.
No, I can tell you two things on that. One, that's actually the one area that is really sad, though, Rich, is how many orgs, just maybe it is because the higher ups don't get it, just refuse to back the coach. Like I can tell you, as much as yes, they're a meme and we can all laugh at all the silly things and how they mismanage their team, it is insane what fucking Fnatic has allowed some of their former players to say publicly that are just barefaced lies, or even worse, like you say, it's a dickhead saying something when it's like, you live in the biggest glass house of all time and Fnatic has like a fucking meteor, motherfucker, but they just get away with it because they get to skate. It's why people don't know, actually, for Fnatic, it was actually pretty daring that they allowed, right at the end of his tenure, Dardo to do that interview with me, where if you ever listened, he did hint at a couple of things that players had done that were kind of a bit sus, and even then he couldn't go, I can tell you, as far as it was behind the scenes. And that's actually also why I will have eternal respect for fucking Striker from BDS Now Shifters, because he was the only person who actually ever did go on record and basically go, no, this Reckless guy is a fucking bitch who ruined the team, and I wanted him out, but they basically told me no, and that's why I'm leaving the organisation now, because they won't back me even. Because if people don't know, that was also, by the way, speaking of the early conversation, that was when Reckless was getting like $300,000 salary to be a fucking LFL player as well. So that was like, I always thought that was mad, because that just showed like Striker was willing to literally just fall on his sword and leave being a coach potentially. Obviously he didn't, because it turned out he was a good enough coach and people knew in the scene he was, and he hopped to actually a better team and a better set of prospects at the time. Okay, I've now got for my good point. This will sound weird, but it's actually playing off what Rich just said there. I do actually think it is a really good thing that KC won 2 out of their first 3 games, because if you look at the games they played, so okay, think about it logically. First of all, they did play KC Blue. Now, even though I agree with you, the actual way you would rig it on one level is you want both teams to make the playoffs. The other one, though, is, and this is why you can never, literally, this is an example of conflict of interest that cannot ever be allowed to happen, is that is how you do the greatest match fixing ever, by the way, because logically KC Blue will never be a favourite. In fact, they'll probably be a massive underdog, and that's where you don't even need the KCB guys to be in on it. You could even just have just a jungler, mate. You just need the right player to just throw the game, and you can make bonkers money off the odds on that one. That could have been like, a 6-1 type odds scenario. So that's all right. And it's just a BO1, even easier to lose, isn't it? You fuck up a Baron, you flash into the wall. There's so many. That's why actually when people do blatant match fixing, that's why I think you should actually almost have your head on a spike, because you're so stupid you can't even just subtly match fix, for fuck's sake. So one, I think it would have been the end of the world for the league if fucking KC initially loses to KC Blue, who on paper should only be able to beat Los Ratones at best. They actually should. Between the two of them, they should go either 0-11 or 1-10 or whatever. Like that is just how it should go. Then secondly, the one team you lost to, MKOI, it's actually okay to lose to. For all we know, they are the best team right now, and they were already arguably better than you for most of last year anyway. And then finally, you held serve and you won the other game. You did actually manage to beat Los Ratones. That's okay. Now, here's why I think ultimately is also really good. Because when I look at their squad, there's a very obvious problem their squad has. There's only one French player now. So that means if you aren't Calist, I can tell you my boy Crowley's learning this the hard way in Los Ratones. When you're not the fucking golden child, when you're not the favoured one by the fans, you're just the whipping boy every time you lose. So I think with this new squad, it's a bit of a powder keg. Like, no one knows how this new exact roster will work out. Like, Bussio, if he'd done bad, if they'd gone 0-3, he'd have had like the Jojo stink on him of like, this is a bad import. The Kiao guy in mid lane, everyone would be losing their minds. They're like, why don't we have a top mid lane? All that shit, mate. Why didn't we get this such and such a... So I think for KC fans, I'm sorry, they are absolutely petulant. And if their team had started like 0-3 or 2, like fucking G2, I think they would already have lost their minds. And already they'd be doing that thing that like all the Liverpool fans did earlier, Rich, where it's like, you notice magically now everything's like, I'll see how the rest of the season goes. About a month ago, it was like, he must be fired. This is the worst coach in football. He has disgraced my father's legacy as a fan. Like, fucking hell. And then, like, about 8 games later, no one gives a shit. We're like, oh, well, we're back. Yep, just keep playing the game. Like, so I think if you're KC, they have just shown me they are the fan base. Maybe it's a problem that they won last year. They have the craziest expectations. They really do. Like, I think you get flamed after. It's going to be T1. You'll get flamed after every loss. So I actually am glad for those players. They at least get a chance to start the league outright because they had a weak schedule aside from MKOI. You had to win those 2 games. I think at least now, like, the atmosphere starts decently. We don't have any of that negativity, especially because also, by the way, we've got all these fucking road shows coming up later in the year. Like, it's going to be a massive thing where you're going to have to face the fucking fans, as it were. So even though it's a rare time I would do this because they're playing a shit schedule, I think it's good that KC won those 2 games.
I mean, you say that, Thorin, but just like an aimbot, you know, if one target's behind a wall, then the aim snaps to the next target. And I don't know if you saw what the KC fans were up to with a certain female broadcaster on
classic.
Twitter the last couple of days.
Classic.
But yeah, so she's taken the bullets for if they had, you know, lost those games, I guess. So what comes around goes around, I suppose. We'll see what happens later on. But yeah, I don't know. I think KC... it's one of those things where it's like, despite whatever you think of their fan base, and MKOI's fan base can be similar-ish at times. Sure. So I feel like it doesn't typically get as dark as a lot of the KC stuff, but they're in a similar boat. I think generally speaking, even having said that, it's usually good when those teams are in the mix.
Yes.
Just because they bring eyeballs, just because they bring storylines and drama. And I guess to a certain extent, even that sort of under the surface impending fan explosion is like a good thing. You hope it doesn't happen, but you like the fact that it could happen just because, again, it drives interest. And as I said, when I alluded to what was sort of happening with the ERLs, I think with Western domestic league in general, we need all the help we can get in terms of, you know, generating. I mean, I even made the joke before that now that we're doing this LEC versus thing, you should almost like have the first half of the year just be the fans get to like pick what all the teams and lineups are, and the sole purpose is just to create as many ridiculous storylines and conflicts as possible. And then after we've had our fun, you know, halfway through the year on the build up to ours, like, okay, let's get serious. Let's all play the proper teams and the proper games of League of Legends now. Let's make everything best of 5 and try and do something, because, you know, what is League at this point? Riot basically has already almost got their wish, which is that slider of WWE versus MLB, where it's like, how much competitive integrity do we even want? And by the way, I'm not even going to say they were completely wrong on that. Like, in terms of something to aspire to, it's pretty sad, but were they wrong? Like, what do fans actually want? Do they want the most competitive possible BO1 League of Legends, or do they want as much drama and conflict and storylines and people calling each other out on Twitter as much as possible? So I don't know. I think it's.
By the way, I also do think you can always tell when people have been away from BO1 formats for too long, because they start thinking that the best team always wins. It's BO1, motherfucker. What are we talking about? Like, Barons get flipped, people just randomly die. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just that's why the format sucks. Look, it's actually the joke is it's actually great if you're going to put teams that aren't good in, because they have no chance otherwise. Yeah. But it does mean that the top teams are going to drop a game here and there, of course.
But also with like teams like Los Ratones or whatever, where it's like, okay, maybe they're just bad. It's like there's always a chance they can steal one. Absolutely. If it was like BO3 or BO5, you'd be like, it's why people keep saying like
the copium now is Los Ratones won't go 0-11, because the joke is by accident you got to trip over eventually and win a fucking game, surely, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, I will say though, we've been positive about KC here, right? But they did show a few really big weaknesses to me. I mean, so yes, they won the game, but I mean, like Los Ratones had were winning it like 20 minutes, no? Like Nemesis was 2K ahead against Kiahu. Like they showed like losable potential this week. And maybe they have a completely new roster. They're going to have all of these.
I would say Los Ratones was ahead. I don't know if they were winning. Winning to me implies that you just almost closed the game. They were ahead. They were slightly. Even then, they were slightly ahead, Peter. Slightly.
Yeah, I mean they were slightly ahead. But what I would say is that the big alarm bell from this week was that Kiahu, like their new Korean mid laner, right, didn't actually play that well in my mind, right? I think the other four were pretty solid. I thought Busio. I mean, I don't think they should have gone Caitlyn Karma. I don't think Karma is even one of Busio's best champions, and he was on like Karma Lulu duty, right, like this week. So it was hard for him to kind of like mess up that badly. But I will say that they did show a bit of weakness around mid. Like he had individual leads against Koi and against because they've been playing through mid and against Los Ratones, but ended up being pretty ineffective in both of those games.
Wait, Peter, are you trying to tell me that a mid laner who wasn't playing particularly well against the self-proclaimed second best mid in the West, who had a 5-0 lead on Orianna, are you telling me that the mid laner won that game? Surely not. Surely not. Surely the second best Western mid laner of all time with a 5-0 lead on Orianna won that game. Surely.
Sure.
Am I wrong? What happened here?
Also, I just want to know where was the Riot actual video for Nemesis coming back to the LEC? Where was like he finally returns after facing Chovy in the hyperbolic time chamber for the last 5 years? Will he finally deliver on his destiny to be as good as Caps? Because everyone dunks on Mickey when he says like leader could be as good as Caps. Bro, Nemesis himself has believed that shit for like 5 years. Whatever playing him, it's mental. Like, but we're just supposed to skip that. I don't know. I don't get it myself. Whatever. It's whatever, isn't it? It's just whatever. To be fair, he was the best. It is the best Los Ratones player. So I get why he doesn't get flamed by their fans. There'd be nothing without him.
They arguably are nothing anyway.
True.
So.
Okay, let's go on then. So the bad. Rich, what is bad right now? I imagine this could be something of
it might be. We might have covered part of it.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I could just be lazy and say, like, Los Ratones in general. But I think this is actually something that I've sort of semi-stolen from Kira because he started to make the point. And I was like, oh, actually, yeah. And then if you go through the players, it's just never going to work. So my conclusion, I know it's week 1. I know that they're probably not even going to take part, although who knows with what Riot's doing in the rest of LEC. But I guess let's see going forward. But for LR to be, like, remotely competitive, especially in this kind of meta, they actually kind of have to make a lineup change. And my main reason for saying this is because they actually don't have anyone who can play Engage. Their jungler, Velya, cannot play Engage at this level. Even before he played in the LEC, this guy always struggled when he came up again. I mean, the way Nymera put it was whenever he comes up against LEC junglers, he always struggles. And I'm like, yeah, but whenever he comes up against really good ERL junglers, he also struggles. Like, this guy just struggles in general against other good junglers, which typically, by the way, means you're just not a very good jungler. To your point earlier of, like, the pipeline and how we pick players or whatever, when Velya originally went to LR, he didn't have some massive reputation. No. He was like a decent-ish jungler, like in solo queue, and had some level of promise.
I even feel like when they announced him, bro, because at least Baus was a streamer, I feel like when they announced him, people were like, who?
Yeah, no, he was the complete odd man out in terms of reputation, which, again, if you're an unknown rookie, that doesn't necessarily mean too much. But this was not like Skumond. This was not like some player that everyone could just viscerally see, okay, this guy is really, really good. So it's not even like, oh, he was super promising, but now he's hit the wall and hopefully he can overcome it because he's... I don't see a logical reason why this guy is ever going to be like a super, super strong jungler in the region. I just don't really see it at all. And again... we did actually like break down frame by frame like the play that he's getting the most hate for, which is obviously like the Jarvan re-engage after Reckless already flashes out. I don't actually think that's like all on him, because if you do go frame by frame, the timing's just super unfortunate. And obviously Flag and Drag does actually have like a channel on it almost, so it does look like he goes in after, where actually he basically goes in on the same frame. But as we also said, that fight is unwinnable anyway. Like, he is inting no matter what. Like, there's just never a good fight. They have Alistair with ult up. They have Talia who can chuck down her E whenever she wants. Like, it's a bad fight no matter what. so it's not good. And he didn't exactly play well in the other games, did he? But that is a problem. Baus, outside of his obvious picks or whatever, I don't even know if you would really... I mean, Sion isn't even like reliable engage anyway. Obviously, he is technically engaged, but he's not really reliable engage as such, and he's not going to get it in half these games. It also hurts that Sion is a really strong meta pick in general, so the odds of him getting it are like going through the floor. And then Reckless is obviously primarily an enchanter player when he's playing support, and he doesn't particularly like... I mean, let's put it this way. He is more likely to flash out of a fight than flash into a fight. One of the only players I ever remember seeing going 0-0-0 from the support position in a losing game. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just...
That's why it's Maddie dead to lock in the Braum. At least if you do it on an army, I don't mind, mate. Like, can't do it on the Braum. What the fuck are you doing? And then everyone goes, Crowdy, fuck this game up. I can't do it, mate. I mean, I can't do this again.
Multiple things can be true, but yeah, it's just like... It's a shit show. And as I said, again, it's weird to project forward because you don't know what's going to happen. There could be a weird world where, let's just say, the Los Ratones somehow managed to get into playoffs and were interesting and they boosted numbers of viewership, etc., that Riot would so badly want them to take part in the rest of the year that they contrive a way to do that. So if that scenario did exist, I basically think they would actually have to make a lineup change, and it would probably have to be jungle. I thought this going in, when we did our power rankings, I said my biggest issue with LR isn't even like, oh, Reckless doesn't play engage or the Bowers isn't going to be able to take the next step. Obviously, those are two concerns, but my biggest issue was actually jungle diff. And I think we've seen that in week 1 already, and I don't see a reason to suspect that's going to change too much. And the meta does not favor them as well, which is a real rough spot to be in. So basically, my bad take is I just see no hope for this team. It's not like some crazy hot take, like no one could see this coming. But my issue isn't that LR are bad, it's that LR are bad, and I don't see the path to being a significant step better than what they are.
And I mean, the jungle situation is fucked because like they put Nemesis on Rise for 2 games in a row, and their jungler's like getting pushed in, getting like he's completely out of it, right? And I mean, what I would say is that I think people forgetting why Los Ratones were successful in ERLs, right? Like they basically win games in like 1 of 4 ways, right? They win games because they have really deep champion pools in best of 5s, which we're playing best of 1s, so it's completely useless. They win games because Baus teams didn't really know how to play into Baus.
Just Baus shit, yeah.
Yeah, sure, but these LEC teams, they don't want to get embarrassed by Los Ratones. No LEC team is going to come into the season into a Los Ratones game and not have like a 15-20 minute meeting on how they're going to deal with like any of this nonsense, right? Then they would stall out games to late game, or they would have like Nemesis 1v9ing team fights, right? Yep. Which is kind of like the same kind of, right? So most of those things, the problem is if you're picking Rise, Nemesis isn't going to 1v9 your team fights, right? You're not going to stall out games unless you're playing against teams which have really poor shot calling. But as I said from my positive point earlier, Humanoid's in the league and Trimby's in the league, so that's 2 of the teams that have bad mid-game shot calling now have better mid-game shot calling. Who are the teams which you could argue have worse mid-game shot calling? Heretics, maybe we'll talk about them later. Fnatic, right? Because Fnatic lost Mickey, right? And you've already lost to Fnatic. So it looks hard for them, but at least they stop. Like I think they've realized that they're just not going to be able to play Talia Rise. I think because they're just not going to gain any advantage off this in the early game, and they're probably just going to have to try to stall games, and maybe a team will throw into them, right? Like Vitality are definitely capable of losing a game into Los Ratones. Given what we saw this weekend. So I don't think it's impossible, but I think, it's not looking good, especially after they lost to KC.
There's one positive, which is, in the interest of balance, which is obviously in the ERLs, we repeatedly saw them in massive gold deficits, which because the opponents weren't particularly good, they would claw them back. LR haven't been losing games in early game typically so far.
True.
They've actually been competitive or have slight leads or only slightly behind going into mid game. That's when the problems have started to come. So it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to say the early games are fixed or whatever, but let's just pretend, oh, that's fixed. But now we're seeing a whole host of issues which are happening on now an LEC level where it's like these are typically harder to overcome than like fixing early game. Because for people who don't know, especially if a team's having like real issues of early game, or if you just as a coach sense that there could be a big advantage to gain in early game, like in lane swap metas, for example, coaches can actually like telegraph and plan like 15-minute blocks at the start. Basically, you can pre-plan the first 15 minutes of most games, or the first 30 minutes, whatever you class as like laning phase, essentially, outside of the Rift, right? And basically prescribe that plan to a team. But beyond that, obviously, they're somewhat on their own. You can't account for all the variables and the weird things that are going to happen once the objectives come into play and so on. So that's actually easier to fix than mid-game and late-game issues. So, yeah, I as I said, I don't really know how that's going to get fixed, because as Peter already alluded to, the kind of things that they need from Nemesis now, coupled with what that now means for what they need from their jungler and support roles, they just don't have it covered. They just simply don't have it covered on a high enough level to deal with it. And Baus is such a bespoke top laner, let's say, that you're not going to be able to like mold him to fill the gaps either. Like, he is who he is, and most people know who he is, especially on this level. So there's just not enough flexibility in this team at all to overcome the chasm of issues, unfortunately, that they have at the moment, or fortunately, depending on what kind of fan you are.
The schedule for Los Ratones in week 1 is another reason why it's a travesty that you would allow KC Blue and KC to be in the league, right? Imagine the main KC team. You can just go to the fucking coaching staff who just played them in the previous game and just ask them all the information from that thing. Like, yeah, sure, you could maybe, if you have the right social connection, do that anyway with the team, but it's not the same as like having the sister team. If people don't know, that literally is also one of the reasons why Koreans had sister teams. Like, back in the day, they used to, even when you went to those boot camps, make the shit sister team scrim you and then basically decide not only are you worthy, but then just take all your information and just like mimic that play against someone else. So already that's nuts as well that they had to play them. But with that said, here's why actually I do think you have to say it's just bad. Because here's the example, right? First of all, in the opening week, if you get Fnatic in your first game with a brand new Fnatic roster that hasn't played together, doesn't have any shot calling components, etc., has all these question marks, that's one of your best chances to get a BO1 win this split. It just is. I mean, as you saw in some of the other games that Fnatic did play, and also in as much as Peter did the copy of when they played the KC main team, like they were winning. Bro, Fnatic looked like they were the team trying to match fix. They were just throwing like, mate, how many times did they do my biggest pet peeve for coaching in all of League of Legends, which is you play like it's a solo queue game and everyone throws everything at the fucking support player. Like, that actually drives me crazy. That is some shit, if people don't know, from way back in the day. That was like some early 2010 shit of like, you actually just wait to fight when people have wasted the fucking ults on the wrong player and then you have an advantage in the fight. Like, that was nuts. They almost tried their best to lose that game. But I always say, you'll have heard this before, people use the terminology of it's a throw. A throw doesn't matter if the other team can't catch it. In that scenario, Fnatic just had a boomerang, mate. Yeah, they were throwing it, kept coming back to them. They just kept getting it back every fucking time. Los Ratones proved incapable of catching the throw and then turning it into a win. Then also, as Peter just pointed out there, this is how you know who didn't watch the fucking the NLC and the EMEA Masters, I will always try to endeavour to say now. Because first of all, they actually did, famously, obviously not even win the last EMEA Masters. Actually, towards the end, people had gotten a little bit of a read on them. They would lose a series here and there, especially the BO3s, they could be beaten. And what you saw was people did figure out how they won. And they didn't win by what people think is. If you look at the names on paper, you'd assume they're the team that must just smash everyone in 15 minutes. No, as you say, first of all, Nemesis was insanely overqualified to be at that level of play. It was fucking bonkers. Like, I might joke about how he's not at the heights he imagines he is, etc., but he literally is someone who always should have been at worst a mid-table LEC mid laner and did literally go to the hypercolic time chamber of Korea and literally play against Chovy, etc. So the idea that guy is playing people who essentially are like fucking almost in like the non-league teams in football who are also like a baker on the weekend, and he's beating them like, yeah, no shit. And the problem is they actually did rely on him to be like the best player in most of their games. And as you've already seen in their first outing into LEC, just think of the Camilo game. Everyone told me that guy's dog shit. Mate, he didn't have any problems in that game. Like, this wasn't some demon he was playing against. Then you go and look at the other angle, which is the Velia one's a real bomber to me, because I actually think this is why I clown on Nemesis for saying that thing about if he'd have moved up. The problem with this is, I would normally agree with Nemesis. You shouldn't do the cynical move up at the end of a year when you're going to get one split. You'll get judged really harshly. Everyone else has got their main teams for the whole year, and you're the rookie. That will ruin your LEC. His problem is this. The reason you don't do that is you stay in the RLs and you develop and you get good, and you don't do that in LR, though, because every scrim is streamed. You are literally... There's another thing, by the way. Here's why your career is cooked, Velia. Because everyone's heard you on all the streams. They've heard all your comms. They've seen what you do. They know that in your team, you actually just aren't some... Like, even if you've got hands, where do they manifest? They manifested in the RLs, yeah, but so far it's not looking like it's going to do anything. And that also, sorry, you aren't going to be the first 15-minute demon who's going to do something like on Boar's level even. So I actually do think it's a waste of time, that whole approach. Then I'll add this in as well, which is the way they also won, as Peter says, is they essentially used their experience in the RLs to punish teams that didn't know how to play mid to late game, right? That reminds me of if you've ever seen poker players play. There's a big difference of when poker players who are top pros play each other, and it's the advanced metagame of, how they're doing it, what's correct. It's very different. If you ever see a pro poker player play a table of amateurs, all they do, mate, is just live in the gaps of where the amateur has no experience and doesn't know what to do. Like, that's why you're not even trying to read the hands. You're just bluffing when people won't have the balls to call something without the best hand and stuff. That's all they did in the RLs, unfortunately. And a lot of it, as you say, a lot of it was those BO5s, mate. If EMEA Masters were to BO3, they could have lost a lot of times. But the amount of times they would clutch it out if you had to actually beat them in 3 out of 5 games was big. None of that applies to the LEC. The LEC is straight BO1. You've got players that are all better. Again, you actually, and then finally, there's the other thing. If you saw them win those mid to late games in the RLs, you might have made the mistake of thinking they have good shot calling. I don't think they have any shot calling, mate. Like, tell me who's the shot caller in this team? You know what I mean?
It's Crowny, isn't it? I think.
I assume because of his career, it must be. By the way, he's the most flamed player. If you look at people like Reckless, they can be notoriously silent. Nemesis is actually a guy who looks at you, always focuses on his own game a lot, and is kind of his own world in mid lane. Velia's a pure rookie, and the bounce is a meme. Like, I'm sorry, it is a real thing in the modern day. Like, people who have the shot callers and who don't, you can tell the difference in those teams, bro. Like, I do think those players are worth their weight in gold when you have them. It's why actually I agree. That's also the thing I'm more scared for with Fnatic, not even the idea of the players are shit. It's just like, how is the team going to win when we get to BO5s? Like, how do you even have a chance to do it? And then lastly, I'll throw this out there, which is, I alluded to it earlier. I also think they have the Nightmare Fuel thing where they already have the KC component where if you're Crowdy, guess what, mate? You're the new Velia. Every time you lose, it's your fault. And if you ever dare imply you don't like being the target and the whipping boy, you get it 10 times harder. Oh, talking about paddling, that's a paddling. Like, mate, the problem in their team is they have so many protected players. I mean, the joke is Crowny is the only one that you're allowed to make a target, because think about it, Bowser's a meme and he's got a cool personality, and besides he's just memeing anyway. Velia's young, so you're not allowed to say anything about him. Reckless is literally the most protected player ever. I can attest to that. And then Nemesis is their best player. So unfortunately, not only if you're Crowny will you get it all the time, but you're even the most logical carry role that will lose the game, because yes, when your ADC dies in a team fight, you tend to lose fucking games of League of Legends. That's just a universal truth. That's not some LR specific thing, even though on top of that, he did play badly this week. So I do think as well, it's going to be some nightmare fuel for people like Crowley. Like, get ready, mate. You're going to take the beating like my boy Upset did. Every time this team loses, it's just your fault. It's always your fault. There'll even be games you'll almost carry. It'll still be your fault when the others die and don't go in. I mean, you might think I'm joking when I say this, but I see the horrors on social media and Reddit. I did see people making excuses for why Reckless as Braum doesn't have to actually like fucking peel for Crowley and why he can like go out to not die. Like, genuinely, they were doing that logic. It's why I made this like meme piece on my Substack for paid subscribers where I basically just to make like a sarcastic version of all the things they say. It's like, well, dying would be losing and Reckless is no loser, so he's definitely not just going to die on a Braum. Why didn't Crowley peel for it? And all the jokes like that you'd think were memes but are real things people say out loud, mate. And then lastly, you said it there. If this was the real LEC, if there was 12 teams and we have a whole year, you're already after week 1 if you're LR thinking like, right, we need some change. We either need a shot caller to come in or we need a different jungler so we can play early game. I'll tell you the biggest problem of all. Think about the real reason they had to also do this LEC versus project is because Cadril actually understands on some level how you negotiate. The ultimate power in a negotiation is I'll just walk away from the table and I won't do the deal. So because it's basically implied, you know what? I'm not going to do ARLs anymore. How about I shut the whole fucking project down and I'm not buying a slot? At that point, you almost have to give him a way into the LEC to at least for once test if there is a big viewership pop, to see if it does bring vibrancy to the league. It's even applied to me, as long as you don't go 0-11, they probably will sit down like they did with Fearless last year and think, is there a way to make this apply for the whole year? Can we have another guest slot in the next season? Because it's implied, even if this season just ends and they did well, they'd shut the project down. So unfortunately, I don't think if it's a one project and then we're done and then it's just back to go streaming thing, I don't know that you do make a roster move. And then finally, I'll throw this out there. I noticed I've never seen anything about this from the Sheep Esports world. Spoiler, I'll give you a quick insight as to why. Sheep Esports famously have published a bunch of salary stuff, but then they do the Travis Gafford. They don't publish the salary stuff. They just tell you stuff like who's spending the most or who's spending the most relative to a variable you can't know, so that the people who know the inside know what that means, but then you can't know. Does that mean they're actually doing a good job? Are they not spending as much? Are they spending more? And the reason why I can tell you, much like Travis is, that means you didn't do it like a journalist where you went and found out through other sources, and so the team can't do shit to you because you just got that information. That means you just got the information directly from the teams. I believe it was even said on Twitter by one of the Shaky Esports people, and you just don't reveal it because the team went, look, I'll tell you some stuff, but don't reveal it all, which isn't journalism, by the way. Again, there's what's that great quote, like, journalism is printing what other people don't want printed, everything else is PR or whatever, like that's all you're doing at that point. So I will just say, I notice that the stories that would pop on the internet never get published, bro. This is why you need the Richard Lewis's and Thorins of the world. I'll tell you the most obvious question I have if you're only playing one split of LEC versus is, do you even actually get paid a salary to play in LEC versus? Or is this still the fucking NLC thing of, lol, you are playing for exposure, which I'll just say as a final point. If you ever in the esports industry try to pay even a tiny nobody in exposure, you are laughed out the room, you are scum, you are like a Victorian slave-driving factory owner abusing a matchstick girl. But magically, if you're Cadril, actually it's okay for trickle-down economics to work via your stream. And apparently, I'll never get this, because here's the thing. Yes, it does help Crowdy and Nemesis' stream if you have Los Ratones member. I'll never understand how it helps Velia. Like, to me, he's someone who probably would need proper salary. He would need, like, he needs development as a talent. So I don't know what the point of that is. So I even wonder about that part, because I wonder how that works in the league. I think if they're not technically an LEC team, do they have to pay the salaries? Are they considered just a guest entering the league? What's even going on with that? 'Cause there's another thing. Are you going to get any players if you have no salary? Who's going to join a team to go 0-11 and then get no salary? So I think they're in a tough spot. Normally, I'd say with any team, look, let's not overreact. It's 3 BO1s. It's week one. You know, some players have never. This is one of the rare cases where I think it's fine to overreact. I think it just looks really fucking bad across the board.
As I said, it's more like the lack of path to getting better that is the issue. Like with if this happened with a different team where you're like, okay, like let's just say Humanoid just started horrendous. I know he didn't have a great week, but let's say he was just so unbelievably bad and Vitality went like 0-3 or something. You might have some coping with, well, Humanoid's probably not touched the game for ages. He's just getting back into the swing of it. It can't be this bad next week. And then it either is and you panic, or it isn't and you're like, okay, yeah, see, the ship has righted itself. With the problem with LR is I just simply do not see the light at the end of the tunnel, because how the players are holistically, like Reckless is an enchanter player. He is not an engaged player, and there is no reason to think between this week and next week that he suddenly will be. The issues that Velia he has had for a very long time. The Bows has been the Bows since, time immemorial. So there's where's the path? Like, where's as I said, there's no flexibility in this team, and they really need there to be flexibility in this team to adapt to the meta and actually have a chance of getting wins. I just don't see it.
Okay, what is your bad point, Peter?
Okay, so my bad point comes from a place of comes from a good place, let's say.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So when I say this, I don't mean to like shit on Heretics and say they have no hope, but basically my bad point is that the Heretics performance this week shows what they need to fix for the rest of the year and the dangers of them not fixing. And basically, my bad point is that Heretics haven't replaced Flakked properly. And when I say that, what I mean is Flakked is somebody who does a lot of shot calling. He's somebody, when you talk about shot calling, there's like two types of shot calling, right? There's like structural shot calling and there's like opportunity shot calling, right? Structural shot calling is, you keep the plan going, you keep everyone focused, you make sure everyone's on the same page. And opportunity shot calling is like when you go, when you're an AD carry and you're calling your target, or when you're supporting, you like say, go on this ability or something like that, right? And Flakked is probably one of the best players in Europe, or one of the best players that I've worked with at being that really, really stable voice, right? And what Heretics have done is that they have taken that out of their team for Ice, who you could argue maybe has better hands. I think it's debatable, but basically they've brought in somebody who gives no shot calling at all, right? He gives literally nothing. He just wants to focus on the game and play the game, right? And that means that you are going to need more shot calling from somewhere else in the team. And the two people that they need to get more shot calling out of are both rookies, right? Serin and Tracer, right? And I think we saw this even in the one game where Heretics win, right? We're 20 minutes into the game. Serin is 3-1-1. He has a massive lead on Rise, and he messes up his next three resets in a row. His lane assignments are bad. He's not calling resources into his lane, so he can do things with Rise. He's like not quite weak siding, right? But his lane assignments are all over the place, and the game goes to like 45 minutes, was it? It was 45, 50 minutes, or it was the longest game of the weekend, right? And that shows what they're missing now that they've gotten rid of Flakked, right? And that is something that they need to fix by the end of the year, because if they don't, like, let's be clear, now that shifters are good, now that Navi look better, now that SK look, I mean, depending on who they're against, but like the SK that we saw against Fnatic at least, these teams aren't going to lose to you like that. So you aren't going to lose to you in the same way that they were losing to the Heretics last year, right? When Heretics were coming sixth, but basically they were getting stomped in the early game and they just stalled out the mid game. Heretics don't seem to have that direction and that plan in the mid game. And it's only 1 week, but this is the thing to track by the end of the year, right? Because this team definitely has a lot of potential. You know, I'm not as high on Serin as Rich is, but I do think that he is a top 2 mid laner you could have gone for this offseason. I'm a big GU fan, but you know, if you want to go for a rookie mid laner, Serin is a good one. He's an upgrade on Camelot for sure, right? Tracing is obviously mega Chad, really great player. Is one of the top rookies that we've seen in the past few years. But you still need that stability, and you still need that shot calling in the mid game, and they look clueless in the mid game. So let's see how they fix it over the course of the rest of this, because it's not going to work as it is now.
My query is, like, I would say, like, I half agree with this take. Okay, so I actually think you had to replace Flakked. I think that Flakked was not offering nearly enough from the AD carry position from a gameplay standpoint. I think not only was he not turning games which were going badly, which isn't necessarily his job as an AD carry, but he wasn't, and he was very close to throwing multiple leads when he had massive leads and was the reason, like the resource at least reason why they were ahead, especially in playoffs at the end of last year. He was like almost doing his best to like lose games from massively winning positions, and I thought he just reached the point where it's like, I think during the course of his LEC career, Flakked has been a very decent AD carry. I think last year was his worst gameplay period for sure. Now, granting the fact that he was doing a lot of the shot calling stuff, how do we replace that? My question is, who was the shot caller, the primary shot caller on the BDS lineup with like Labrov Shio? Because I think it was Shio. I could be wrong.
Problem is, it was always claimed to me privately
Nuke.
that like Striker claimed it was Nuke, but I also think Nuke was his golden boy. I always thought it was Crowley when they had him before. Then I assume it had to be the jungler, didn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it was for sure Crowley.
And I think logically, the person, if you ever just look how they played, who called like the fucking Baron Dragon fights, was just Labrov, surely. Like, you know, so I don't know. Maybe it was a committee. Who knows?
The thing is, the reason why I asked the question is twofold. One, because I also don't really buy the Nuke angle, though obviously I can't prove that it is one way or another. But the other thing is, one of the biggest criticisms on Shio while he was on that team was that he was a good player who, you know, especially on Vi and other picks in terms of like these heavy agency jungle picks, that surely he must have been doing or taking up some of the shot calling. You can't be good at those champions, and also, by the way, int games as those champions, unless you have a lot of agency. So at minimum, he had a lot of agency on that team. That doesn't mean he's a primary shot caller, but he must have had some kind, and he's also playing jungle. So there must be a modicum at least of shot calling responsibility there. So I would have, when I looked at this team in the offseason, I was assuming that this guy would most likely have most of the shot calling responsibility. If he doesn't, I agree there's a bit of a problem here, because what you're really then needing is, as Kira always loves to call Ice, he's a stat stick AD carry, right? He's a very good, does his role. I always bring up the Patrick quote of, I am not a League of Legends player, I am an AD carry.
Okay.
And I feel that's
I like that.
kind of like what Ice is to a certain extent. So what you're really hoping is, if you're not going to get enough from Shio, Stend kind of needs to step up here. I would say, at least from a logical standpoint, I want my support player, especially because if Ice isn't offering much in comms, which makes sense, also because he's he's Korean as well.
Yeah.
I want a lane leader, and that should come from support typically anyway. Usually you would default to support if it's not the AD carry, if you don't have a Flakked or a Crowny type personality. So I think this is a case of Shio and Stend kind of need to sort it out between them. Again, a lot of this is just conjecture. I don't know these personalities in depth, but that's what I would hope to happen.
Sure.
And all I'll say is I'll play this same card again, which is week 1. Let's see what happens in week 2. If the same sort of issues are presenting themselves in week 2, then I'll be much more all in on the side of what Peter's laid out. For now, though, I do think, based on his recent performances, I do kind of feel like the replacing Flakked did make sense. But again, as Peter said, if you haven't actually replaced what you've lost, then there's still a gap there. But yeah, Shio or Stend, I think. Let's see what happens in week 2, but hopefully Stend steps up. That would be the dream, because I think Stend's really good, actually.
Yeah. But I think even week 2, like, I don't think it's a problem now. I think it's really just a marker for what they need to improve. Like, frankly, if Heretics have a bad winter split and it's fixed by the start of spring, I think that's also okay. But it's really, really clear what you've lost and what you need to replace. I think that's my point.
No, here's the thing. I obviously don't think Peter is saying Flakked is just like as good a fucking pure ADC as Ice. I mean, anyone with eyes can see that's not the case. But I know what he means. He was one of the only people who had like a veteran presence within that team and seemingly like could influence the game. I know. Also, I will say as well, if it turns out that someone like Shio doesn't want to embrace like shot call, I'd be really disappointed, because I think his game suits it massively. So I always find it really sad. It's actually one of the things I did think that Mickey did lack a little bit. Mickey hasn't been enough of a captain and like a shot call. He's a brilliant player if you ever listen to him, but a lot of it's more like, maybe he thinks that in his head and doesn't say it in the game, or in the review he can do it. Like, it is a shame when people of that type of a game can't essentially like communicate what they're seeing and their angles to the rest of the team, because I think that is actually what makes you super effective and makes you worth your weight in gold. Also, I know what you mean on the ADC angle. Like, that's actually a fucking banger line, because I've always said there are 2 types of AD carry. There are the ones who, when they get fed, they call the game around themselves. They basically say, like in basketball terms, give me the fucking ball and get out my way, or follow me and do this. That's the double F type people. That's why every single double F team ever becomes a double F team. It's actually the myth that Upset does that. He does that when the team goes to shit, and it's the only way to win, I'll tell you that. He doesn't do that at the beginning. If anything, he does the opposite. He has that to a fault. He tries to just be a team player, and even be the weak side sometimes. But the other type of ADC is the one where they have the hands in the game, but you have to pilot them around the map. I've always said that type of ADC, which, by the way, spoiler, it's very rare you have the double F type AD or wage out type ADC. Yeah. Majority of the ADCs are the ones that are being sort of like, it's funny you can't stats it. In Counter-Strike, we call this type of player a turret. They'll shoot anything in their way, but you have to move the turret around and aim it in the right direction. I've always said, playing ADC in League beyond the early days, you're not even playing the game like the other laners. We call you a carry, right, because you can carry the team fights. But whereas, like, the joke is the solo laners can roam and interact with the jungle and do all these cool things and get all the solo kit. What you tend to do as an ADC, my joke is, and the analogy has always been, you're playing Time Crisis. Your job is, like, in Time Crisis, you don't move the character if you don't. You're on rails. You move from one location to another, and you shoot everything as you go there. That's what fucking ADC is if you're not the double F type ADC. So someone like Rice also must be helped by his teammates and his coaches to have him put into position. In fact, that was the one thing I'd even say was the downside of this guy in BDS. He could carry the fuck out of games, but there's certain champions you notice. I don't think it's that he couldn't play them. I think those are the champions that involve comms, or you're like roaming a little bit every now and then, and those were the ones that were not that good. He was the guy, you did put him on the one where it's like a solo queue game and he's going to clean up around the Baron fight. That's what he was the best at. I'll also just throw this out there. This is just a humorous joke. Peter was in NA. Rich knows what I'm talking about. This is one of those moments where I am so grateful that we have certain Koreans specifically in the LEC and not the LCS. Because do you remember, guys, let's say roughly half a decade ago when a certain cultural incident happened and your boy Thorin had the mistake of locking in a skin that was a cop skin right after that in an LCS game, and people went mental. So if your alias in the game is Ice and you were an LCS player right now, your life would be worth nothing on Twitter, mate. You would literally, I'd say don't even open socials. Like, even though you've done nothing, there would actually be people saying stuff like, you better change your name, that's a fact. And it would actually become a shit show in a way that's just so parasocial. Sadly, I don't trust League fans not to go down that path, even though it has fuck all to do with the game. The reason also, by the way, I don't mind this as a bad point too, is because I do still think, if you look, and we've all kind of agreed on it, I do still think it's a pretty well put together squad. I think it's kind of a sleeper squad. I even think if you watch those games, they were more winnable than people might realise. They weren't actually just a terrible team. This is one of those ones where I don't panic too much. The shot calling angle's an interesting one. I would say if you wait, I think they stabilise and still become a mid-table team, which is what I always had them being anyway. I never actually had them being a contender. I just had them as they could be like, 6th, 7th type team. I think that's like a reasonable place for them. I even think that's a good spot to be in. And then also, when you have rookies like this, we talked about past week, but you've done a good job with the rookies. Again, if you are someone like Fnatic, how are you not getting someone like Trayson? What is going on in your pipeline or your off-season process where your only choices bring Oscar back or go to like Vladdy's mate? How are you not the one getting them into the Trayson type pickup? Because those players would walk into your team and be everything your fans want them to be. So I think actually Heretics low-key kind of a sleeper.
It's literally, I always say with the Fnatic thing, they are literally just supplying the Korean best friend logic to Greece. It's Vladdy was like, unhappy on KC, wasn't having a great time. Let's bring him a Greek buddy. And so this is this guy's primary role on the team, by the way. Don't get him mistaken. Forget weak side, strong side. His primary role is not to play top lane. It's to hold Vladdy's hand and said, "You having a good day, little buddy? Yeah, everything going okay?"
Here's a joke for you, Rich. Instead of it being the film Get Him to the Greek, it's called Get Him the Greek. And then obviously Sam Matthews plays the role of Russell Brand in that one. So there you go.
Well, arguably does that on the daily anyway.
Yeah, that's what I meant by it. It's all good. Anyone who's here's what's sad. I can always tell people who've never met Sam Matthews because they do just get really aggressive with him and like call him like no. If you've ever actually met him, he's like feckless, if you know that word in English. He's very harmless actually. In fact, he's quite a social, like chill guy. The problem is he does present as like an Elon Musk guy. He has none of the fucking. He doesn't have any like brilliant charm to him. He's just a guy where he's just like a fucking. He's just a strange fellow, put it that way. But you can't take it seriously if you hate him. Like. Yeah, I can't hate someone like that, mate. I just couldn't. It's like hating Joy from Friends, really, bro. Come on, mate.
He's not self-aware enough.
No, I know. Like,
come on. You'd have to be aware of what he's doing and saying to actually,
Okay, here's what I've picked for my bad point. You notice for this week, I'm having to fill in the gaps myself. I'm the fucking poker player abusing the angler. Right? I'm phrasing this very carefully, gentlemen. I'm not saying that G2's start is bad because, spoiler, they've got so many BO1s, so they have that real roster, and it is G2 still. Like, they'll wake up probably this week and just fucking clap people, and then within 3 weeks, they'll be top of the league again, and then eventually when you get in the playoffs, no one will ever remember that they ever started badly, just like last year. No one now even remembers why Kyoto made that statement and that they started dodgy at the beginning of the winter, because it's all forgotten. But I'll tell you what, this is the bad thing about G2's week, is that they have given out free wins to teams who would never have gotten that free win if this was like week 4, mate. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the year, when you play a single round of BO1, I'm sorry, for G2 it doesn't matter, but there are lesser teams, you go down, maybe could be like the GXs of the world, where actually that is going to maybe be the difference between you and KC as to who gets to go to a better position later on or get a better playoff seeding, that one BO1, because the difference is later, when they play G2, I'm sure SK thought this, is like, can't we play the one from the fucking first day? Why do we have to play the real G2 when you get like you get the meme one that's like, lol, who gives a shit and loses the game anyway? What is this one? Like, lock it in me again. It's me, motherfucker. Why can't I have that? Like, so I think that's the real problem I have is like, because G2 essentially in this case can afford to be profligate. They can just be the fucking, I can just give up, lol, have a free, you get a free win, they were just giving people wins that they shouldn't really have had. The MKOI one I'll give you, that one might be legit. Yeah. I don't know about that GX one, mate. Like, I want to believe in GX, but I watched that and I'm just like, does G2 actually give a fuck about that game? Isn't that almost just like, bit of rope-a-dope? Like, you can have this one now. We'll see you in the playoffs, motherfucker. I'll see you in that playoff second round. See ya.
I mean, I think like Broken Blade and Skewmon did an interview on stage with Law after the third game, and I've never seen a more nonchalant losing record team ever, by the way.
Sure.
Like, these people, and like they were kind of like semi-dodging the questions when they were basically, because I think she asked like maybe a couple of sort of game-specific questions, and their answers were just like, yeah, everyone's just like living life and having a great time. We all feel like we're improving like off stage, so yeah, everything's great. And I'm like, that is all great and cool and whatever, but you guys are actually 1 and 2. Like, I'm not saying it's, sound the alarms or whatever, but you know, that they seemed very casual, and maybe this is like part of the strategy. It's like not to
Put it
stress
this
out
way,
too much.
if you are T1, you can never be 1 and 2 no matter what, 0 and 2. You know, you never are allowed to do that. It's true.
Yeah, there's no trucks imminently arriving to worry about. But even so, I was a bit like, And there are just a couple of signs where it's like, okay, like obviously I and everyone else believes that G2 will most likely just end up being the best team.
Yeah.
But we are year on year seeing, just as an example, more of like Caps just inting games, like just hard inting games and being like an actual loss condition, which we have not seen since basically his rookie spell on Fnatic.
By the way, if people don't know, here's why if you're Capsule, you can never lose, bro. I don't know if people notice this, because a lot of people don't give a fuck. On that League Awards, they still give him LEC Player of the Year.
Yeah.
When I read that, I was like, Scuba was better than me. I was like, what? Surely Hans Sammer or Scuba's even better than GT.
Yeah.
No, but that just shows if you are Caps, mate, you have the most gilded fucking path from here on out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's whatever,
Easy
but
placed.
like
Keep going.
The thing is, like, I think people don't realize just how massive a lead Caps had on the rest of the region for like a very long time. That even though he is dropping off a year on year at this point, he had accrued such a ludicrous lead that he's maybe still like the best mid laner or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Like to me, I don't think you can have the year that Broken Blade had last year and be complacent. Now, again, he ramped up at the end of summer as well, and he was like a good player again. But it got so bad around that MSI period that I was legitimately, for the first time in his career, sat there thinking, I actually don't know if we're ever going to see Broken Blade again, like the real Broken Blade. That may have been it. You never know with League players. Like sometimes they drop off, and because physicality and stuff isn't much of a factor, you're genuinely in the dark as like, will this guy come back? You know, it's not like it's a string of injuries or something. Like, you just don't know. But he did come back, and I was like, oh, damn. Because he hit a real low point and somehow managed to pull himself out of that chasm. But having said that, you still then can't just go into the next year and start playing not particularly well again. By the way, I'm not saying Broken Blade had like a disastrous first week or something, but he wasn't wonderful, was he? And a lot of the players on I mean, arguably, again, laughably, Skewmon was probably had the highest highs on that team in week 1. But people have retconned his entire winter from last split as well and pretended that he had a horrible start there. So we'll see what the narrative is come the end of the year. But I don't think that G2 had such an awesome, dominant year that they can be resting on laurels or not using this time to ramp up. And because it's back to BO1s and so on, I think they need all the games they can get. I think if they're true to their goal, their stated goal when they made this roster at the start of last year of we don't just want to be domestically dominant, we want to be a factor internationally, you guys need to play every game like it's a serious game of League of Legends. So yeah, that's my one concern. Obviously, I'm not concerned about them being a powerhouse in the context of Europe right now, but I don't think you can be having more weeks like this.
Sure.
I think, firstly, I agree with you completely. Like Caps and BB, like had really rough patches last year. Like the people have often forgotten. I would say Hans Sammer and Skewmon ramped over the course of the year. I mean, I'm not saying he was dreadful in winter, but he definitely was really, really good by summer. Whereas in winter he was just fine. But I think Hans Sammer was like a rock over the course of the year.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing we saw this week. This week, like you compare how BB was in that interview with Milwin, right? Like Milwin has something to prove. He feels that like
his job's on the line.
His job's on the line, and he's also like he respects that he needs to get better, and he acknowledges that he needs to get better, and he is getting obviously clearly better, right? Like the Milwin that we saw this week was significantly better than the Milwin we saw last year. But so I don't like this from G2. We've seen it many, many times in the past from G2, and it's worked out fine for them. But I think that the league, like I said, there's fewer pre-wins in this LEC, and it can hurt them much, much more than maybe they've been able to in the past.
Put it this way.
By the way,
go on.
No, I was just going to say, like, unironically, this is obviously, a fairly unethical, sort of cynical way of approaching a situation like that. But I almost feel like if I was in charge of G2 or something, I'd almost be like feeding fake news stories about like, maybe we at G2 will be looking at elite Korean mid laners or top laners for our 2027 or something. I feel, to Peter's point, that Caps and BB, it's almost like they have tenure. Like, they just feel like they have tenure and there's no real light under them because there aren't players in the league who are obviously pushing them super hard. I mean, I mentioned Canna. Like, I think Canna has just been a better top laner than BB over the last however long. But there haven't really been strong suggestions that he would like go to G2 or something like this. I think these guys need to know that no one is irreplaceable. And I think Caps at one point was essentially irreplaceable. Apex Caps was so ludicrous and has all the advantages of being a native speaker and so on that he was essentially irreplaceable, but that was fine because he was playing at a level which made him irreplaceable. Right now, like, unironically, I know that he signed a new contract recently or whatever. I would have put my hat in the ring for BDD when that was like a hypothetical thing. Again, I'm not saying it was realistic or whatever, but I feel like these guys need to actually feel that they're not just the biggest fish in a small pond, but they need to live up to their aspirations of we want to be relevant internationally. And right now, I didn't really see anything last year other than the prospect of them just ramping up more the longer they stay together, that they're going to be able to compete with Korea. It doesn't feel like that to me. So that's my big concern with this team, because we're judging G2 on a different level than these other teams. When we talk about KC, when we talk about your Fnatics or MKOIs or whoever, we're talking about how can you guys seize control of the region and reach the summit of Europe. G2 shouldn't be judged by those metrics. They've done that year on year on year on year. They need to be judged, not solely, but almost solely on what can you give me internationally? What's the ceiling? How much can you push the region? Because you are the flagship team that's meant to be pushing the region. And that week one was definitely not me thinking, gosh, can't wait for Worlds or MSI. Like, come on, guys, get a grip. Like, time's ticking.
The problem is the state of the EU mid lane pool has never been worse, and that was literally our pride and joy for like a solid 10 years. So the other issue you have is that's why you had to reach for BDD as the example. Because here's what's sad. If you'd have actually had the league we had even 5-6 years ago with like tons of talented mid laners, I'd have gone one further, which is when I see the gradual diminishing returns on Caps, I actually would have just like potentially like done the thing where you sign him and then sell him after this year, mate. Because I'll tell you what, you could trick loads of the other orgs into thinking like, it's my time to get Caps, but then they'd be getting like the older Caps, mate. Meanwhile, you do then bring in either like a really good up-and-coming player or established player now. The problem is there aren't really those players in the league, so you have to hang on to him. And then you have also, unfortunately, you've built your whole brand around him as well, haven't you? You're not just in a position to just go and be silly in the transfer market, because I do think actually he's seen his best days. I've just seen it year now. In fact, now we're even at the point, and I'll give you a little secret analytical lens. When someone's one of the best players ever, when their fans start going, yeah, but he didn't play that bad. Yeah, but he had an okay game. Yeah, but look, the stats look okay. That tells you you're not playing well, because the greatest players don't have to have copium, mate. Like you can see it. It shows it. They carry games. They don't just do okay in a game. And he basically just won that mid of the year one by default. He just won it because Vladdy's head went off and Humanoid wasn't anything. Like, what do you want? Anyway, The problem you have if you're in G2, I've got another solution for you. This week, you didn't even manage to get 90 minutes of good playtime, but this message is sponsored by Raycon. And if you have the every year classic Raycon earbuds, just 10 minutes worth of charging your batteries would have given you 90 minutes of playtime at a premium level, wouldn't it? See, so you can see how they would have used it. Also, in their team, I don't necessarily know, still have they figured out like the whole shot calling dynamic? Do they actually have what they need overall? They usually just get by on being really good players. They're well coached. They get it drilled in the scrims. They come out. Well, you know what? If you are someone who gets the everyday earbuds, they obviously have, first of all, active noise cancellation. You can block out those voices. I'm sure Shocks wishes she had those. She could put that mode on herself and stop listening to all the KC fans. I said it out loud. I can do that, Rich. Then also, they have the awareness mode, which is the one where you can have it do like the one where blocks out sound, or you can do the awareness mode. By the way, I always say this was invented so that people don't go jogging, run across a road, and then a car goes straight to the side of their head like that. It's the one where when you hold it or activate it, it lets in a bit more of the ambient sound, so you both hear what you're saying in the earbuds, and you hear some of the sounds around you. Can be useful, for example, if you have kids and they're running around, or you're cooking and doing something and watching the TV in the background. It allows you to do multiple things. Speaking of multiple things, you must like every team needs to connect all the pieces together. They have the multi-point connectivity where you can connect to 2 devices at the same time and seamlessly switch between them. So also they've all got all cool colours and stuff, even though that's not my thing, is it? And also G2 doesn't have cool colours, so maybe they do need a rebrand actually. I don't know what their colour scheme is. Anyway, you can get the Everyday Earbuds Classics and everything else to help you crush your New Year goals by going to buyraycon.com/league show, all one word, to get 20% off site-wide. So that's everything on their website. That's buyraycon.com/league show for 20% off site-wide. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this segment. Now let us move to the section of the show called The Ugly, which, if anyone doesn't know, is just a clever way to just let anyone crowbar any point they want in any context, because who can decide what's ugly? We're all some sort of post-modern fucking, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So, Peter, Rich, what is ugly at the moment? What don't you like? Or is likeable but not likeable? What is ugly to you, and what is ugly in the league?
I mean, this was something I was just only thinking about a couple of days ago. It was literally one of those things where, you're on your porch with a bit of corn sticking out the side of your mouth, shotgun across your lap, and it's like, hang on, and just lean forward, wood creaking, and I'm like, wait a minute, what has actually gone on in mid lane this offseason? Now, to me, this is like absolutely bonkers, because if we remember, Humanoid, midway through last year, was removed from Fnatic. And they didn't even need to state public. Well, we know why he was moved from Fnatic. We know what all the memes are. We know that supposedly he's not amazingly hardworking. Supposedly there was some minor personal conflicts, whatever.
It's implied he just didn't give a fuck, mate. He just sort of tapped out, yeah.
Yeah, but essentially, this guy was not removed because he was bad at League of Legends.
No.
Let's put it that way.
He even came off a great split.
And then, another team who are famed for definitely not ever falling short on making bad decisions, Vitality, also kicked a rookie mid laner who I thought had, I'm not saying Vitality, he was right for them necessarily, but I thought he did well enough to be an LEC. At least, and he was removed. And again, the strong rumors / definitely actually just leaks were that he was also, quote unquote, not trying hard enough or not putting enough into it, however you want to phrase that. So I'm like, okay, so that's a little bit of a theme going here. So he's out. And then Vladdy, obviously, who was removed from KC, well, we all know the reasons why this guy was supposedly moved. And then I was like, wait a minute, checks notes, who's the current mid laner for Fnatic? Why is Vladdy now the mid laner for Fnatic after you just booted Humanoid for Polby, who was just I guess a placeholder, and now you've gone back? What is going on? And by the way, that move has also forced you to bring in, as I said, his Korean / Greek buddy in the top lane, who was essentially just a gangplank one trick in the RLs, by the way, for people who don't know. It might be all the more confusing because he's now name changed, I guess, in part to get away from that being what he's known for. Vitality now have Humanoid, so he's gone what is going on here? And Shayak is without a job. So I don't know. To me, this is the classic case. These organizations have not earned enough grace for us to just sit back and be like, you know what? I'll just sit back and let them cook. It's cook what at this point? What is going on here? The thing that annoys me the most about GMing in Europe for the last however long is that there is no. And I gave this sort of example on EuroLeague as well. It's they did a thing on Sky Sports where they're let's all pretend that we are Ineos. We are the owners of Manchester United. How are we going to pick managers? And there's here's a list of managers. Which ones do you like? And Henri, who was one of the guys on the panel, was why are we doing it like this? Well, surely it's what do you want from your manager as a starting point? And then we're eliminating names that maybe we all think are really good, but surely it's about what we want, not, this guy's really good or this guy's really good. No, it's about what's right for us. So surely that should be the approach. But clearly these guys do not adopt that philosophy at all, as evidenced by what's going on here. So for me, I find this doubly frustrating as well, because I know obviously some of these people who are involved in the organizations and how resources are being used. And I will just give one example because it would take too long to go through all three teams. But Fnatic obviously have a guy who has been working for them officially on and off, but basically working with them the entire time, called Dardo, right? I know Dardo very well. I worked with him at H2K for a considerable period of time. This guy is a very intelligent person, at least relative to esports. He has a very strong skill set. And there are lots of things that you could want to do with this guy in terms of how you would place him from a business perspective or whatever else. This guy should never, ever have been in charge of making teams or been anywhere near it. I always say, when he came into H2K, this guy, I believe, I'm not sure about this, he'd either never played League before or he'd barely touched the game. And he would play bot lobbies and stuff to learn the game, because obviously once he's involved in the organization, he took the approach of I at least need to know a little bit about it, right? So he started learning the game, as far as I know, then. I have seen nothing to suggest that he has at any point become this League of Legends expert. especially to the point where it's like he can watch an ERL game and scout like little micro maneuvers or whatever, where it's like, you know what, that guy's got the edge over this guy. The idea that he was in charge of making roster decisions and for this long is bonkers. Again, by the way, this is not me having a go at Dardo. Quite the opposite. You take the job that you're offered, mate. If they're willing to give you that job, go for it. Like, I'm happy that he'd had the role. But this is a complete misallocation of resources. And again, the barely sentient Sam Matthews, who's been at Fnatic for, you know, well, he is the founder for anyone who doesn't know. So he's been there since the very beginning. Why was this, like, how are these decisions made? What is this process? Why is it when things go wrong that these two guys appear on a live stream to answer fan questions? Like, it's just laughable. It's just hilariously stupid. It's like if a football team got their janitor and the kit guy to, like, no, this makes no sense whatsoever. And Patrick, another guy, or Khan for more widely known, obviously the very good player in CS, historically great player in CS, who also has done lots of great things organizationally, probably not recently, but on the Counter-Strike side, in Fnatic, in years gone by, he, for a period of time, might still be, although I'm less sure now, was also involved on the League of Legends side. Yes. And basically it was a two-pronged thing of Dardo and Khan. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, great, one of the goats of 1.6 and Dardo, who's like a business major. Like, huh? Like, why are these the two people who are constructing these rosters? So again, it's not even like I can say, oh, you know, people can come from any walks of life. Maybe they're just right for the job. No, we can reverse engineer the results and then look at the inception of how the people making the decisions even got there, put the two together and be like, no, this was a match made in hell. This makes no fucking sense. And that's why they're betraying their own philosophy of people aren't working hard enough. Well, then you shouldn't be on Fnatic. And by the way, Grabs and others in Fnatic spent the whole of last year preaching to us about people simply aren't working hard enough. Yep. That was the narrative all the way through. Thank you for being transparent. Appreciate it. Always good when people come out and say what's really going on. But now you've hired Vladdy. Like, what the fuck is happening? So, yeah, I hate this particularly mid-lane roster construction that's been going on in the LEC. I think it's holding multiple teams back, and I just don't really understand what's going on. And also, again, I won't go into sort of full details, I guess, with like Vitality, but the idea that, you know, you've got Mac, who at one point in time obviously was on a streak of doing super well across different organizations or whatever, is now in I believe his official title is Coach of Coaches. So basically, he is like coaching teams or coaching the coaches of the various teams within the Vitality organization. Like, to me, that just sounds like a grift, but whatever, good for you. Like, cool, King of Kings, whatever. But I just don't understand. Even now, we talked about, and Peter highlighted, which I really agree with, by the way, the uptick that some of the GMing has that's taken place in the region. From like the smaller teams, let's just call them that. I know it's a bit of a derogatory term, but you know what I mean by that. The teams that we expect less from, but some of the bigger organizations, at least when it comes to historic spend with Vitality or historic success like Fnatic, are still cocking up their GMing. So that to me is a sad thing. It's like, I'll say 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because I agree with Peter that overall it's gone up, but it's still very frustrating to me that this is an issue.
I mean, should we do both of them or should we just do Fnatic?
Maybe for, you know, time's sake, just Fnatic, yeah, okay. I suppose.
Fnatic. So I think, yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you for Fnatic. Like, the problem that I have is that Emperos, I don't think is bad, like the top laner, right? But the thing is, he is a 1v1 duelist top laner. He wants to play Jax, he wants to play Rumble, he wants to play GP, but he doesn't play GP in a passive way. He plays a GP where he's literally going to jump on your face and like run you down level 1 in lane with his passive, right? He's not the type of guy who will stall the game and like play out for late game. He's going to play really, really aggressively, and they put him on a team with a mid laner. Like, even when Vladdy was playing at his best, he's not a roam first mid laner, right? He's a 1v1 laning mid laner, right? Who is going to go and play for his lane and call attention to his lane. Upset, sure, Upset maybe does want to play weak side, but he wasn't playing weak side that much last year, right? And that means where's all the jungle resources? Where you're not going to get any mid lane roaming. You have this guy who's going to 1v1 the opponent to the death because that's the only thing he's good at. Like, Emperos is not a really good tank player, and he's not really that good at playing weak side, right? But he's really good. Like, you give him resources, he can play really, really well, right? And this week, he got exploited. Like, I mean, people were really, really like attacking him very hard, and he's just going to give up the kills, right? And then what are you going to ask from him? Like, you put a rookie that has a very specific style of play, and you put him into a team environment like this, where it's going to like it's going to be a disaster, right? Like, and that to me is the biggest issue, right? Because I do think Empiros is good enough to play LEC. Like, I think he has potential, but I think that if he'd been put on a team like Navi, things would have been fine for him, right? But I think that he's going to have a really, really rough
the expectations are going to be nuts, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is the problem. In terms of work ethic, I think, it's one of those situations where it's like, oh, I believe I can fix this person. Our superior coaching and our superior systems are going to give this guy the thing that he needs. But yeah, I mean, it's puzzling. But for me, the Fnatic roster issue is not about the mid lane issue, because in Europe, like, who are you going to go to? Who is the next guy down? Like, I don't think there's like infinite people unless you're going to import, and it seems like Grabs they didn't want to really import. So
we get our GP one trick to, I don't know, maybe play GP as well, which is very viable in this meta. Like, what is that not considered? Instead of saving Flash and dying on Rumble and then failing to use Flash when the enemy top lane is 1 HP, how about that?
I mean, the problem I have is that they gave an interview where they said they liked him because he was aggressive, right? But that means your first week should be literally the first gank every single game should be coming to top, and you should set a statement. Like, that's what Vitality did with NAC, right? Last year.
But there's also this thing of, like, sorry to interrupt. There's also this thing though, where how much is true, how much is narrative, I don't know. Where it's like, Razork is pathing to bot because Upset demands it be the way, or whatever. Yeah. Or maybe even Razork agrees that Upset's the best player, so he should path to bot. And we saw the whole of last year, basically, when they're playing together, that Razork was just permanently pathing to bot. So now you have this guy who can't survive in the lane on his own, most likely, at least in a lot of matchups when he's not playing things like GP, who is not going to be getting any jungle attention. And by the way, enemy jungler knows he's not going to be getting any jungle attention. So it's like, what I don't understand this construction, like, whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, look, obviously the point that Rich was making wasn't necessarily specifically even about Vitality, so we don't have to do them. It was more that, like, how can both teams say the reason I'm kicking you is X, and then recruit someone who was also kicked for exactly X, and then doesn't do not X, which is what you're then saying. So I agree with that. That is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I'm sorry, the Shayak one, Peter, is the reason why, without going into a whole thing, is why I don't, even though I know you actually believe it, you put your job on the line for it, mate, to try and do these 2-year projects and give people time. Other people just say that as bullshit in interviews to get away with them having picked up a guy that doesn't do well now, and they do plan on kicking them anyway after a split, after a year, and they don't do it. Because again, the whole point to me of that Vitality roster was the idea you did believe in the solo laners. Look, one of them showed a lot more promise, but the other one showed some decent games, and he was going to get time to develop, and one day he would become a top player. The idea at the end of the age, go, what, can I get a humanoid though? Even though, by the way, you're also doing what I just said earlier, you're getting the caps at the end of the career one. You're not getting the good humanoid, you're getting the one where it's like, he's still pretty decent, but at this point in time, the joke is he has fatal flaws. This isn't Raheem Sterling can't play for Manchester City, so he goes to Chelsea. This is like if Raheem Sterling was like, I don't give a fuck about the game anymore, and Chelsea was like, well, fuck it, used to be really good though, and they just signed him. It's like, what's that signing like? That's ass. So I think the Fnatic one is the most criminal one, because I do think, like, let's be real, here's where the one area you got unlucky and lucky if you're Fnatic. You got unlucky in this sense, that it did end up being, even though I will always say at the time it was signed, it was not only a totally fine signing, it was a very good signing. It looked like an excellent signing when Humanoid joined Fnatic. That ended up being, through circumstances you couldn't have predicted, like the VC capital all going away and all the rest of it, it ended up being the biggest millstone around your neck ever. And the joke is, it lasted so long that at the end, the mid lane talent had already died. And if it wasn't, by the way, for Vladdy losing his fucking head in KC, that fell in your lap. The joke is, you'd have had Seven or someone mid at this point in time, or Porby again, you know what I mean? Like, if anything, Fnatic, you actually got a little bit lucky. There was even someone with talent available. But I'll tell you what, here's what's funny to me. One, the whole mid lane European pool is really dark. Like, at this point in time, I'm sorry, just like with the BDD one, I'll go one step lower. At this point in time, Europe has to start actually competing for those fucking quid type players, man. Actually, that's the sort of player we probably need to bring in. Like, you can't just bring in the next best ERL player. A lot of them, sorry, aren't going to be generational talents. That kind of, like, that lineage doesn't look like it's going to continue. In fact, the last generation, you could argue, were the failures. The only one that's even made it of them actually so far is Vladdy. bad. Even Jackie's has sort of stagnated, hasn't done fuck all for about a year. And then I'll also throw this out there, which is, it is so interesting that seemingly one area we are football boys, we're sports in this sense, is seemingly when it comes to star players, people clearly must be massive believers in terrain theory. They just think it's the environment that makes these players bad, mate. It's never the player himself. It's never, the player never has that flaw or that lack of way. It's always the idea of like, well, you know, the joke is, I can tell you right now, every coach that ever coached Reckless went into it going, oh, I don't care about the stories because I'm going to be the one that like wins him over and be the Reckless whisperer. And at the end, the joke is like when they're all retired, they'll all be in a bar sometime, shit swapping stories like the ones I revealed and just going like, shit, it was like that with you. Oh, it was me as well. Oh, fuck, I wish I'd have talked to him before. And then like they all had the same fucking story at the end and it was like, yeah, guess what? It was him, not you. That's the problem. You all thought it was like, you know, if you put me in a different team, they almost think at this point in time, you put a different shirt on and as the shirt goes over the person's eyes, they transform into the player you wish they were. That is just fucking, that's pure fantasy. So I do think right now it is wild the way some of the GMing is done because in general it's good. Here's what's funny. I'll say this. We've taken one step up. The GMing of like your bad players is pretty good now. Yeah. The GMing of star players is still a fucking nightmare. And I still don't know what some of these teams are doing. And then on the Fnatic one, as you just said, I'll use the analogy you made earlier in the show. This would be like if you had a coach who could discipline people and then you had a coach who could like be friends with players, but you had no strategic coach. That's what the GMing at Fnatic was. Because as you say, you took like someone who hit, by the way, if it was CS, Khan would have the eye for the game, but he's not even pretending to do that. He's delegating it. Dardo should basically be your guy at best who runs like the fucking analyzer and just does nuts and crunches numbers. Because I always said, I never ever bought into the flame with Dardo that he signs bad players. Here's my problem with Dardo. He signs them like he's playing Football Manager. Like they're not humans that have to communicate and have different roles. You're just signing players that have stats. Because if you have a look at some of the people he signed a lot of big names, a lot of good names too. The problem was there were pieces that didn't fit together, sometimes never could have fit together, and you didn't put the pieces in to mix them up as well. So I don't know. I think it's a pretty whack move. I agree. I think, by the way, it's a good thing to put in ugly. Because again, notice you didn't say like Humanoid can't be in the league, Vitality should never sign. The point is though, it's just ugly the circumstances in which you did. And also notice here, like I alluded to before, this is why there's a big difference. Put it this way, I'll give you a quick other football analogy. I actually think my team's manager, Liverpool, I think the biggest mistake Arne Slot did is he is Dutch. And if you don't know Dutch culture, they really appreciate frankness and being blunt and being honest. And that actually bit him in his arse so hard because he stupidly, when they were losing games in Liverpool, would actually go out there and tell you maybe players weren't playing well or someone didn't fit the squad. What he didn't know was media in England in football isn't about saying what you actually think, mate. It's the opposite. It's about never saying what you actually think of what's going on. It's about saying American style, the right PR answer. That means you never blame a player and you always take the blame on yourself. And it's basically what Grabs does basically overall the whole time. So that is part of the problem. I do think that some people miss that detail. It's like, when these people are telling us, oh, I'm just developing people, well, yes, a lot of promise, they're just saying that to buy themselves time, mate, or to not get flamed because the player isn't good enough yet. A lot of these GMs, they don't actually believe that. There's only people like Peter are the true believers. The rest of them, absolutely. The second they get a chance, they will ruthlessly eject a guy they pretended was their boy 5 minutes earlier into the fucking wilderness of never playing again. I was even thinking about it when I looked at it now. I'll tell you another player like Shayak, who I think was hard done by. Mate, is it really just the end forever now for Vethio? He can't ever play League of Legends. Like, he can't even be a top 10 mid laner. Really? Every time I ever saw him, even in the bad teams, he had promise, mate. He had something, you know. But I guess we're just completely done with him now. Meanwhile, yes, Humanoid at the end. Mate, he could actually just never play the game and just turn up to the officials, and I believe he'd get signed to a team at this point in time. Like, he's that name value. Just Flakked fans might hate him, but I tell you what, that Braden goes a long way in the LEC teams. Like, it's almost Niski-esque. It doesn't matter how bad you are at the end, they'll sign you still, mate. You'll still get a job. Okay, anyway, we've run out of that one. Peter, what is ugly?
Yeah, my ugly point is, we spoke a little bit about the positives about Koi and about Mo, and we touched on it earlier. But my ugly point is that Koi were good this week, but holy shit, their game against Shifters was awful. Like, Jojo and Alvaro literally ran it, unlike anything that I've seen from, like, anybody else this entire split, you know? Like, what on earth went on there? Because I mean, it just looked like So it looked like, having played last game twice on Saturday and Sunday, it looked like on Monday they were already exhausted. That's what it looked like. which, is one of the reasons why I don't really dislike this best of one playing back to back to back. But, after I was ready to come on the show, go and say, MKOI, they're going to be so fucking good. They're going to destroy everybody.
Yeah.
And then they just ran it for like an entire game. And, sure, some of that is on shifters being better. But also, like, come on, man. Like, you can't lose in 25 minutes to shifters. With like, what was it? Like, I'm just checking the thing. Yeah, Jojo 171 and like Avara 062, Super 051. To be fair, Super only started like really suffering after Alvaro was already 0-2 and Jojo was already 0-2. But holy moly, that was a really rough game to watch as somebody who kind of hopes that Koi will do well. I will say, Merwin and Yuria still playing pretty well that game, despite everything else going on. But bot side, ugly.
My thing, so before the start of the season, again, when we were sort of doing power rankings, like a lot of the discussion was like, did we have KC second or did we have MKOI second? Because obviously everyone just had G2 first or whatever. I had KC third. And the reason I had KC third was I just felt that the ceiling doesn't feel like it can go too much higher. But the floor seemingly is getting, it's not that it's getting lower or something, but it's always been a little bit wobbly. And one of the main reasons for that is actually Alvaro. I think Alvaro at his best, you can argue, is the best support in the region. Like when he plays at his absolute best. But he's been more and more sprinkling in games where you're like, what the hell is that? And he's one of these players where every now and then when you're thinking towards the end of the year and you're like thinking about award shows and stuff, you're like, this guy's probably my number one support right now. And then he'll just like string together a bunch of performances. You're like, fuck, I mean, I don't even think I can use him anymore. I think I have to go with someone else because he's just put in so many bad games. And again, it's only week one or whatever, but it is another Alvaro stinker. And it's like, damn, this guy sometimes is so good that you feel that he can hang with some of the best supports in the world internationally, and has done so, by the way. But you also feel like he can just drag his team down. Similarly with Jojo, but in a very different way. Obviously, when Jojo came into the league, I was super excited because I was like, if we get a good version of Jojo, that's such an awesome storyline for the league. Then he was complete dog shit for at least a split. I don't have the exact timeline, but at least a split. But by the end of the year, I was like, yes, we have Jojo. Like, we have the proper Jojo. He looks really good. He had very good series against the likes of Caps. And earlier in the year, he had a very good series against Humanoid as well, I believe. And I just thought, yeah, okay, awesome. And my description of their ceiling was actually thinking, I reckon this year Jojo can get even better. I reckon Jojo can play at an even higher level. So for me, that was their new ceiling, but it's basically just predicated on one player going to an even higher level, which, because he's a mid laner, it could mean a lot, but it could also not mean that much. The other positions I kind of feel like are hard capped at this point. I like Merwin. I think he's a good player. I think he, obviously his versatility and his picks and so on is good, but I think he's also kind of a known quantity. I'm not sure I'm going to get too many more surprises. Maybe I will. Maybe he is just that eclectic that we do get some more Merwin surprises, but it doesn't feel like I'm likely to get that sort of added value on top of what we've already seen. Super, I feel this is maybe a make or break question mark split also for Super, where he is such a sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe bad kind of player that maybe he can shore up that consistency. But again, these are not players coming off rookie seasons, and they've now been in the league for 2 years, and it's like, is Super going to shore up those sort of game-losing mistakes that he is capable of? By the way, I think Super's really good, but I also think, you know who Super is? Super is Hans Sammer in the first year at Rogue.
The only ones, yes.
He was a really great AD carry for 90% of the time, and then he loses a fight solo at Baron, and they lose the whole series. Like, that's what it felt like to me, like that famous Kaiser top lane fight against G2 in playoffs last year, for example. He had another couple of high-profile boo-boos, let's call them, towards the end of the year. And it's like, can I trust this guy as much as current-day Hans Sammer, for example? No, I don't think I can. And I know that's a fairly high bar, but if you want to win the league, that's kind of what you need to be shooting for. And Elyoya used to be the pillar of consistency back in his Mad days and his first year after Mad. This guy was the most consistently good jungler in Europe. Yes, Razork probably had ever so slightly higher highs, but Razork could let you down in big series in the way that Elyoya, I don't think, did. But then last year again, Elyoya started having ropey periods of play. And then again, towards the end of summer, or during summer, if I have my timeline right, El Yo-Yo started playing really good again, but it wasn't like he'd gone above and beyond the previous versions of himself. So Mad, basically, in my opinion, has loads of really good pieces who can all be really good, but they all need to be really good at the same time to have a chance at winning. And unfortunately, I actually think inconsistencies are, if anything, creeping in, not going away. So I don't really trust them. So I'm kind of, again, hoping that Jojo hits like a new level to push them above and beyond a G2, for example, who will come online at some point. So yeah, I don't know. That's why I had them below KC. By the way, I think Mad could easily be better than KC, but KC for me, there's more positive question marks, let's say. Whereas if all those question marks are hit, I think they just go just one spot beyond KC, beyond Koi for me.
One of the reasons I actually do think Melzek gets a little bit underrated is because I already think that when MKOI's at their best, they mildly overperform the roster, actually. Like, I do think winning and being in 2 finals is actually an excellent result for that roster overall. Like, they shouldn't have been like I actually think them being better than KC essentially at the end of the year is a very legit result. I thought the KC roster looked fucking straight fire. Like, they underperformed, if anything. Similarly, and they're also one of the rare teams where I don't mind the way you've played into the national angle. Like, it has formed some sort of like a fucking coherency in a team play to the team that again allows people to be a little bit better, because I don't think this is a fucking all-star team, and I still don't. In fact, when I look at them, I always think people look at their highs, and maybe their fans, because they're super hardcore, just go too hard on them, mate, when they have the odd loss. Like, I actually look at this roster, and there's like, if anything, I thought the most bold thing they did was keep both Super and Mirrorwood and go, look, there's your job's on the line, but we're going to put like the fire to your feet, just improve, or we'll have to replace you eventually. If I was the GM, I'd have done a cynical replacement anyway and tried to get what I needed that they weren't giving me in the team. Like, obvious example would have been like a better ADC or something, even though that might be considered sacrilegious to MKOI fans because he'd have to be bloody Spanish or something, wouldn't he? Whereas I'd have just taken like an upset or something, mate. I think you would just make a way better squad at that point in time. So I think the nuts thing for me is, what people ignore is, think about what you just said about this game that they lost. Bro, if you have a game in which Jojo just doesn't lane well and then Alvaro plays badly, mate, I've barely got anyone good left in the team, like actual top players, like that's it. You are going to lose that game, absolutely. In fact, their bot lane being better than the other bot lane was one of the primary win conditions they have as a team. And actually, I'll give credit to Shifters in that regard. First of all, Shifters, if you watch it, ignore the record, they actually do look better than the actual fucking losses they had. They look like that roster's pretty decent. And secondly, the bot lane smurfed in that game. That was a fucking brilliant one. There's a reason why every time we do that bloody side select show every year, Rich, at the end, and we do the Wish You Were Here one, because I got bored of saying Inspired 1 million times, or Reckless needs to come back, then it's Trimby, isn't it? Like, let's have fucking Trimby come back to the LEC. Clearly was a talent. It's still one of the greatest mysteries ever. Why he constantly just has to, like, he's like fucking, this is a deep pull right now. It's like the old school fucking Incredible Hulk TV series. No matter what he does, it's always onto the fucking fucking thumbing a ride to the next town to try and solve the next fucking insane scenario. This guy's, it should have been actually, it should have been him and Mickey X, like the current generation of the greatest fucking supports we have, and then the most sought after pieces. But for whatever reason, he had to fuck off to Brazil, and then people had to remember, oh wait, shit, he's at Worlds, he still exists. Oh, cool, right? He didn't just sink down to an era, and he was good. He was also fucking good. Yeah, absolutely. So no, I think you've all made very valid points. I just think it is ugly, because what it shows is this: in the same way as people aren't overreacting to the 1-2 from G2, at the same time, MKOI had the chance to make it like we're the best team, no questions asked after week 1, but they still plant that little seed of doubt in your mind of like, if they go to an MSI, will they get it done? Will they do the usual shenanigans and fuck up? Will Alvaro play like this internationally again? That's always the fear. We're all scared about it.
The thing that triggers me, though, with Alvaro is that he had such an insane game against KC literally less than 24 hours before this, right? Like, he was on Bard against KC, like, he hit almost every single ult in that game.
Yes.
And it just makes no sense.
Right, there's 1 point left, and in theory we have limited time, so let's just get this one done. Right, I've saved it till the end. If you had someone who's doing the table analysis, yes, the most fraudulent 2-1 team is clearly called Fnatic. That is, I told you, the joke is, Los Ratones should have actually started 1-0. They should have actually have won that game. It also might have set people with a realistic expectation, and everyone wanted to flame Fnatic. They just had to wait 5 minutes to do it. Like, the problem is this team looks so fraudulent, boys. Like, again, spoiler, if you're listening upset, get ready. It's going to be a bad fucking year for you again, mate. You could literally be the MVP of the league again. You are going to get banged. Your head is banged in because you are going to get hated on. So this Fnatic, like, it is rough, boys. Like, I put it to you, I will predict they will have literally 5 5 BO1s that at like 22 minutes they just lose the game. This team just looks like it's bad.
Yeah, I think to me, Fnatic are actually, again, only 1 week, but they're exactly what I think or thought they would be. Probably too much talent to miss playoffs, not enough to be a contender. As I said, I think Emperor's is I'm not saying it doesn't have any upside, but I think it is just Korean friend syndrome primarily. I don't know too much about Losper, but I think it's quite telling. And again, this goes back into what I was saying about the Fnatic's GMing. I think it's quite telling that Fnatic were willing to spend a significant amount of money to try and bring Jun back. And so, like, how much thought has actually been put into this Losper guy, or was it just a panic buy? Or so yeah,
and it was even implied they wanted Exa kick at one point in time instead of upset. So it sounds like they got all the second choices, mate.
Yeah, so it just speaks to a lack of a solid plan, or certainly a lack of a solid plan B. So yeah, again, I don't know much about him. I'm gonna wait to fully judge him, but yeah, I'm not really convinced. And then yeah, the Vladdy, like, I'm probably higher on Vladdy still than most people, because I think I've actually watched every single professional game that Vladdy's ever played.
He's a very talented player, mate. That's real.
When he was on Natives in NLC and playing in EU Masters, like, I have never seen, or I don't remember seeing, such a 1v9 carry job for such an untalented team as this guy was doing in there. I know it's a different level, but
sure.
Yeah, and then I was actually a bit disappointed. Most people were like, you know what, Vladdy's done all right when he first came into LEC. I was actually disappointed because I was like, I think this guy has a chance to cement himself as a top 3 like Western mid laner. But then eventually he did do that, or it seemed like he was doing that the following split, and he had back-to-back amazing series against Humanoid and then Caps, completely diffed both of them in semi-finals and finals. And I was thinking, okay, this is it. Like, he is going to be one of the next generation of awesome EU mids. Since then, obviously, he has sown quite a lot of seeds of doubt, and not just for gameplay reasons, but for out of the Rift reasons, which does leave me obviously very concerned. Did I see anything in week 1 which made me feel particularly strongly about either of my previous stances on Vladdy? Not really. So yeah, that's just that to me is the massive question mark. Basically, this Fnatic team is how good is Vladdy actually? That is the underlying sort of umbrella I would use for this team. How good is he actually? Because if Vladdy is actually destined to be this awesome mid lane force, Fnatic can actually contend. They can actually be a very good team, but he needs to be really good. And by the way, to Peter's point, when he talked about how Vladdy likes to be a sort of 1v1 mid laner, I think that's two-pronged. That's true, but it's the way he's a 1v1 mid laner is not how you might think or how you perceive a lot of 1v1 mid laners to be. This is not some super lame dominant force in all facets of laning. He is I want to heavily trade with you, and I'm okay to semi-screw up my wave state to do it. This guy is not going to be like super dominant, shove you under tower, and they get priority roam to like 4-man bot or something. It doesn't happen. He is not a side laning maestro in the laning phase. He is as Peter said, what I would call a pure 1v1 mid laner when it comes to that. So if he's really winning those trades, he's going to be up in the lane as well as a byproduct, rather than he's controlling the waves perfectly to then get a favorable trade off. It's in one of those directions and not the other. So yeah, that needs to improve fundamentally anyway. I actually think he needs to become a better mid laner, because again, as Peter said, you're not going to get this super reliable weak side lane controlling state from your top laner. He's probably going to he's in the FPS games, he's what we call like a W key player. Emperors likes to go forward and shoot people. He's going to go forward in the lane for better or worse, and you live with the result, which means that your mid laner needs to have control of the lane. That doesn't just mean winning the 1v1, it means actually controlling the wave states. Can Vladdy do that? Up until this point, he has not proven that he can do that. Even when he had that really good patch in spring, he was not some awesome dominant laner. He was just really good at 1v1ing people, and he would put you under so much pressure that you would either have to back, or you would just be so low health that you would just essentially concede the lane, and then he gets to roam and make plays off that, typically in Northside River. So how good can Vladdy be is basically this team. I'm just going to sit on the fence of this and say he's probably going to be like a 6.5, 7 out of 10, which I don't think will be enough for Fnatic to contend, because I don't think that Razork is going to be good enough consistently in playoffs, as he truthfully never really is anyway, to get them over the line. And Upset is obviously a great AD carry, but again, are we just going to see a repeat of we only play for bot lane and top lane gets left on an island and gets killed off cooldown? Like, I don't know. I don't believe in this team's construction. I don't believe in the players enough to say they'll be better than where I put them, which is 5th.
Interesting. I had them as 6th and then 5th and by the end of the year. But yeah, no, I think that this is a team that, Navi should have beaten them. Like Poby made 2 very uncharacteristic, really bad mistakes. One to the top inhib, where he just, like, they're taking the top inhib, they're really far ahead, and then he just overstays and then dies, which is unlike what you normally see from Poby. And then there was like one at like 31 minutes. I can't remember the exact moment of the game. I just got it written in my notes, where 31-20, where he just makes like a catastrophic mistake. Oh no, I remember this. So they're setting up for the soul fight, and he's just farming in the topside jungle for no reason. Which is like very uncharacteristically Poby, for them to lose to Navi, because maybe he was overgrouping with the team, I would say, when he was on Fnatic. So that's what it took for them to lose, like, because Navi had just such a large lead, and obviously once you've lost the lead, you're not winning that game, right? And then the Los Ratones game, obviously, like, there was a throw in that game, and then SK showed how to play against them. So I think it's kind of a fraudulent 2-1. But yeah, we have a lot to see from them for the rest of the season. But the 2 teams that I was kind of scared of for week 1 were Heretics, for the reasons we talked about before, and Fnatic for the reasons we talked about now. And like, I think both of these at the start of the season, I think it was important for Shifters, I think it was important for Navi, and I think it was important for KOI to show us something. I think for week 2, it's very important for Heretics and Fnatic to show us something. And I think the pressure shifts going to.
Well, let's see what we show you on the next episode of Best Damn League Show.